Chapter 2010. 2 hours later. When I, Jiang Tian, arrived at the world-defying sect, I punched out and destroyed this sect. No matter how the elders and disciples of the Aoshi sect begged, Jiang Tian attacked mercilessly. His fists broke the heavens and earth, and his legs swept the sun and moon. Thousands of people died with just a wave of his hand. In the blink of an eye, the Aoshi sect's heads rolled and blood flowed like a river. All the disciples were killed. An hour later, when I, Jiang Tian, arrived at the Buddha-defying sect, I also slaughtered everyone. All the evil monks in the sect were killed. Then Frost Moonsword sect, Ice Fire sect, Great Sword Tower, Moving Mountain sect. Jiang Tian galloped through the heavens and earth, moving through the continent and sweeping through everything in his path. Anyone who went against him would be destroyed. At this moment, the entire continent was extremely shocked. Too terrifying. I haven't seen such an expert in at least several hundred years. He has an unparalleled appearance. The monarchs and leaders of many countries, as well as the powerhouses of the divine sects and sacred grounds, all looked at the wild figure covered in blood. They were shocked, nervous, and terrified. When I, Jiang Tian, was massacring everyone in my path. Luoying sect. In a spacious and bright hall, Huang Linger sat behind a graceful woman in a palace dress. Her face was bitter, and she was crying secretly. Opposite her sat a middle-aged man with a beard. He was tall and strong, and his face was tattooed with lightning. Today, the sect master of the Thunderyang sect and the Luoying sect's sect master, Lian Huahan, were discussing the details of the wedding. When Yang Yongchang saw Huang Linger's sad face, he couldn't help but laugh. Ling-er, why are you so sad? Are you not satisfied with Tian-er? He smiled bitterly and sighed. I'm not boasting. In fact, Tian-er is a good man with both talent and looks. He's definitely a good match. It's just that he's busy with the sect's affairs, so he didn't come personally. If you can see him, you'll definitely like him. This girl is just too infatuated. I've told her so many times, but she can't see through me. Even Lian Huahan couldn't help but sigh in her heart. She knew that Huang Linger had someone she loved deeply on earth, so she was very resistant to this marriage. Merely, Lian Huahan felt that this was unrealistic. Huang Linger had already stepped into the central galaxy and belonged to a completely different level of life. A few hundred to 1,000 years was just a phase in a cultivator's life, but for an ordinary person, it was a lifetime. If Huang Linger was together with the cultivator she admired, even if he was not a mortal and just had a low cultivation level, it would still be inappropriate. When she was still in her prime, her lover might have already turned into a pile of yellow earth and a few white bones. With this thought in mind, Lian Huahan smiled and said, Brother Yang, on Ling-er's home planet, marriages between men and women are always attended by their parents and relatives. Now the wedding day is just around the corner, but your parents and family are far away from you. It is understandable that they are feeling sad. Understandable, understandable. Yang Yongchang laughed heartily, and did not take it to heart. Sect leader Yang, please forgive me for my rudeness. Huang Linger put away her sadness and curtsied with a smile. Her every move was graceful, like a peerless pearl, a rare treasure. It's okay. Yang Yongchang admired her very much. Huang Linger's face was calm, but she had made up her mind. It was Lian Huahan who had saved her on Mars. She had to repay her for saving her life. The wedding had to be held, but there was no point in living like this. Then she would kill herself immediately after the ceremony. Yang Yongchang and Lian Huahuan's laughter rang in her ears again. The higher-ups of the two sects were very happy about the upcoming wedding. This represented an alliance that would strengthen their forces. However, all of a sudden, Yang Yongchang's expression changed drastically. He jumped to his feet and exclaimed, Oh no, Tian-er, something happened. The soul tablet on his waist flickered rapidly before it was completely extinguished. The whole process took less than 10 seconds. He's dead. Who dares to make a move on Yang Zongzi? This is simply unbelievable. The culprit behind the scenes killed a soul transformation realm expert in 5 seconds. He should have the strength of a void return saint. The higher-ups of the two sects had a drastic change in expression. They were filled with disbelief, anger, sadness, suspicion, and complicated emotions. This Brother Yang, who would make a move on Tian? Even Lian Huahan stood up with a startled expression. She didn't expect such a thing to happen. It was equivalent to the failure of the marriage alliance between the Thunder Yang sect and the Luoying sect. Yang Yongchang frowned and didn't say a word. The culprit acted too quickly. Yang Dingtian didn't have time to use the communication artifact to leave behind any clues. Looking at the location where the soul tablet went out, it should be something that happened in the Eastern Empire. Could this be related to Jiang Xiqing? Someone made a guess. Because the experts of the mortal empires, even the imperial clan, wouldn't dare to make a move on the experts of the hidden sections. Especially when the Thunder Yang sect was a relatively large sect. In the Eastern Empire, Jiang Xiqing was probably the only one who dared to make a move on the Thunder Yang sect who was at the Saint Realm. No, the state preceptor's housewarming ceremony is ongoing. Jiang Xiqing is too busy. It can't be him. Someone shook his head resolutely. It shouldn't be him. Many people deeply agreed with him. Jiang Xiqing was tyrannical. If he killed someone, he wouldn't hide it and would do it openly. At this time, a messenger disciple walked in. He bowed and said quickly, "Senior brother, I'm sorry." He quickly said, "Zhongnu seniors of the Thunder Yang sect, I have an important matter to report." "Speak." Lian Huahan waved her sleeves and said, "During the Eastern Empire's State Preceptor Xiqing's housewarming ceremony, State Preceptor Xiqing had a conflict with the world-defying sects Suzhia, the Defying Buddha sect's old ancestor Black Buddha, and the Cold Moon Sword sect's elder Yuhua because of the abolition of the Marquis system. Both sides fought. Suzhia, Black Buddha, Yuhua, and many other experts fell. That disciple gasped for breath and said, after Jiang Xiqing killed 4 half-saints and 38 soul transformation experts, he left the Eastern Imperial City and went to the continent. He pushed his way through and eliminated the Cold Moon Sword sect." What? Everyone was shocked. They had never thought that Jiang Tian would be so powerful. Even some saints with years of experience might not be able to achieve such a feat, let alone them. It could be said that Jiang Tian's battle had pushed him to the top 10 of the continental combat power roll, which was enough for him to stand shoulder to shoulder with the giants in the sacred grounds. No one had thought that Jiang Tian would be so powerful that he even dared to destroy the divine sects. Jiang Tian came from a remote planet outside the Milky Way. It was said that he came from the Black Sun planet region. Refugees from such a remote planet would have a natural sense of inferiority and fear when facing the natives of the continent. It was like an ordinary person facing a cultivator or an ant facing a human. That kind of fear went deep into the bones and couldn't be overcome. It was instinctive. Perhaps in the ancient times, the central galaxy had suppressed a planet outside the Milky Way, which brought extreme fear to their ancestors. It had become a taboo in their minds and a part of their bloodline, and that fear had been passed down through their bloodline. The giants of the ancient medicine hall and the 9 mystery sect have already left. I hope they can persuade Jiang Xiqing to stop killing. What about us? The disciple asked. I'll go myself. Lian Huahan bowed to Yang Yongchang and said apologetically, Brother Yang, I'm sorry for your loss. Also, my father is in seclusion. I'm afraid I'll have to deal with the chaos in the Eastern Empire. Go now. Yang Yongchang quickly nodded. Then he planned to leave the Luoying sect to investigate the mysterious death of his son. However, before he left, he called the messenger disciple and said, Can you give me a detailed report of the battle at the banquet? Chapter 2011. Of course. Senior, please take a look. The messenger disciple quickly handed over a jade scroll. These things happened in public and couldn't be concealed. There was no need to conceal it either. As expected, it isn't him. Yang Yongchang immediately realized that Jiang Xiqing was fighting with the big shots in the state preceptor's residence when his son perished. Who is it? Why did they kill my Tian? He frowned and left in a hurry. In the blink of an eye, all the big shots in the hall had left. Huang Linger was stunned for a moment and couldn't believe what had just happened. Yang Dingtian had suddenly perished, and this marriage contract was naturally invalid. Beside her, the blue-clothed senior Xing snorted and spoke with disdain. Huang Linger, without this marriage contract, You are no longer the future wife of the Thunder Yang sect patriarch. Recognize your status. In fact, Huang Linger had always treated people humbly and appropriately. But Senior Xing and these native disciples had a deep prejudice against the cultivators from outside the river, and loved to nitpick. Senior, I understand. Huang Linger bowed deeply with a respectful attitude. Humph. Senior Xing, why are you being so fierce? You are just a senior and not a master. What right do you have to give orders? Linger, don't be afraid of him. If he dares to bully you, we will report to our master. Linger, let's go to Wuxia City at the foot of the mountain to buy some rouge and powder. A few of the senior and junior sisters suddenly stood on Huang Linger's side and protected her, causing Senior Xing to be speechless. Didn't this group of girls hate Huang Linger the most, and want nothing more than to eat her flesh and sleep on her skin? How did they become friends so quickly? Senior Xing couldn't understand the friendship between women. But he didn't know. This group of women didn't truly hate Huang Linger. They were just jealous that she could find a suitable husband. Now that Yang Dingtian was dead, and Huang Linger was the same as them, they would naturally accept it. Of course, if Huang Linger wasn't in the 10 Beauties painting and was mediocre and ugly, they would be even more fond of her. Sure. Huang Linger smiled sweetly, her beautiful eyes curved into a beautiful crescent moon shape, bright and beautiful like the warm spring sun. He felt like a bird that had just been released from its cage. His body and mind were extremely relaxed, as if the world had become bigger. Yang Dingtian is dead. Why am I so happy? All of a sudden, the little girl frowned and blamed herself for her viciousness and darkness. But soon she figured it out. Yang Dingtian's life and death have nothing to do with me. I'm just happy because the engagement was cancelled. I also hope that she can live. Huang Linger's state of mind became relaxed again. Stepping on the flying sword, she flew down the mountain with her senior sisters towards Wuxia City. The hall master of the ancient medicine hall, Pil Sage Guhi, a supreme elder of the Nine Mysteries sect, and Lian Huahan were still a step too late. Although their movement techniques were extremely fast and would only require 2 to 3 days to traverse the entire continent, they were still a step too late. They were simply unable to catch up to Jiang Tian's pace. When they arrived at a sect, they would see a sect that had been completely exterminated, and Jiang Tian's figure was nowhere to be seen. Jiang Tian had already completed this massacre. Cold Moon Sword sect, Aoshi sect, Defying Buddha sect, and all the other large and small sects were all exterminated. This was an extremely cruel massacre, and at least tens of thousands of people had died in the hands of Jiang Tian. The scene was extremely cruel, and many sects were uprooted along with their mountain gates and foundations. There were also some sects that didn't even have the corpses of their disciples, as they had all turned into ashes, and were annihilated from this world. What was even more shocking was that when Jiang Tian traversed the entire continent and eliminated the enemy sects, the feudal lords of the state minister's residence were so frightened that they didn't even dare to run. Instead, they obediently knelt on the ground and began to repent and hand over their power. They cried bitterly, claiming that they had been blinded by Lard to collude with the reclusive sects and become enemies with the state minister. They hoped that the Eastern royal family would forgive them and put in a good word for them in front of Jiang Tian, so that he wouldn't kill them. After all, with Jiang Tian's decisive personality, he would definitely settle the score and kill them all. Not even a chicken or a dog would be spared. Jiang Tian had shown them that his strength was comparable to that of a sage. They were worried that Jiang Tian would leave behind a doppelganger or some other backup plan to kill them directly. Generally speaking, the doppelganger left behind by a sage was about the strength of a soul formation cultivator. Logically speaking, with so many soul formation cultivators working together, they should be able to escape. However, they didn't dare to take the risk. They had already been scared out of their wits by Jiang Tian, and their psychological defenses had collapsed. Moreover, Fairy Qingjue of the Nine Mysteries sect was on the side of the imperial family. If he attacked, the feudal lords wouldn't be able to resist. After all, he was a real half-step void return cultivator. However, Wu Yachong and the other princes and envoys of the other countries had already left. They were also afraid that Jiang Tian would settle the score with them. Of course they fled. As for Eastern Lu, he didn't dare to stop them. After all, if he did, it would be a big deal. It would cause chaos and many empires would besiege them. 3 days later. Thud. Jiang Tian landed in the imperial advisor's residence. His body was covered in blood and his clothes were ragged. His face was as pale as a sheet, and he was panting heavily. Divine blood spilled all over the ground, dragging long bloodstains on his clothes. He staggered and was on the verge of collapsing. Dad! Jiang Beibei rushed to him with tears in her beautiful eyes. Master! Are you okay? Blackie also went to Jiang Tian and supported him. His youthful face was full of concern. He was funny and loved to joke. Normally, when Jiang Tian was defeated, he would secretly tease him or pretend to be nervous even if he was concerned. But today he was really worried, because Jiang Tian was seriously injured this time. There were countless wounds all over his body, even endangering his spirit embryo and nascent soul. Those wounds were sometimes repaired by Jiang Tian's vast magic power, and sometimes cut by the strange laws of the Great Tao. Blood flowed, bones were exposed, and organs were damaged. Imperial Advisor. Eastern Lu led the royal family to greet him. Mou and Dong Fangying were already tearing up. Senior. Lin Hanqing and Fang Jinlong also went to greet him. Lin Yang and Fang Goyu both knelt on the ground. Their hearts were full of regret. Jiang Tian had informed them in advance of this big change, and they had promised to cooperate. But in the end, there was still an accident. Lin Dyer had ruined everything. Originally, this big battle didn't have to happen. Now Jiang Tian could be said to have walked in front of the gates of hell. He's back. Lin Dyer was so shocked that she knelt on the ground, trembling in fear. Her heart was full of regret, and her pretty face was pale. She never thought that Jiang Tian's strength would be so tyrannical. He had killed a saint and killed many half-saints and soul formation cultivators. This valiant battle record was enough to stand proudly at the top of the Saint Origin continent, and be on par with the giants of the sacred grounds. When she recalled Jiang Tian's decisive appearance and how she defended Jiang Tian time and time again, she was terrified from the bottom of her heart. This was a peerless, ferocious god that would easily annihilate an entire clan, and he was ruthless and merciless to the extreme. At this moment, she really regretted it. If she hadn't looked down on Jiang Tian because of his background, she wouldn't have been defeated time and time again. In the end, she wouldn't have walked to the opposite side of Jiang Tian, or even the opposite side of the entire Eastern Empire. Chapter 2012. Lord Imperial Tutor, take care. Please don't leave us. Imperial Tutor. At this moment, many commoners saw this scene through their observation artifacts. They all bowed in the air and shed tears of gratitude. This battle was getting more and more intense. The passing me Jiang Tian paid the price of half his life. He brushed shoulders with death time and time again. He fell into desperate situations time and time again. He narrowly escaped death. He used his blood to fill the sky and suppress the vassals. He opened up a path for the commoners and the lower class. From now on, the great Tao faced the heavens. Everyone could become a talent and ascend to the heavens. It could even be said that the impact of this battle was not limited to the Eastern Empire. It would affect the entire Saint Origin continent. By planting a seed, the mortal empires could be strong enough and still walk their own path. They would not have to submit to the reclusive sects, be manipulated by them, and be their puppets. I can still fight. The passing me Jiang Tian waved his hand and dismissed the crowd. He sat cross-legged on the high platform. What are you worried about? I fought to my heart's content. I wanted to continue playing music and fighting. Unfortunately, no one is coming to kill me. Wu Yachang is running too fast. He was riddled with wounds and on the verge of death. But at this moment he was full of vigor. He was like a god who stood high above the 9 heavens and looked down on the world. The vassals and even Eastern Lu were firmly suppressed. Thump! Thump! The vassals knelt down in fright. We know our wrongs. Please forgive us, Imperial Tutor. Indeed, the feudal system has many drawbacks. It makes us enjoy leisure and hate work, and bully the weak. It makes the lower class lose the opportunity and path to promotion. In the long run, the country will not be a country. We support the imperial tutor's abolition of the feudal system and voluntarily give up our titles. Siqing, imperial tutor is wholeheartedly for the public good. We, on the other hand, have forgotten our loyalty and patriotism for the sake of our own strength. We have sinned deeply. Whoever is the enemy of the imperial preceptor and obstructs the implementation of the county system is the same as forgetting the teachings of the ancestors. They are the enemy of the whole world and reversing the wheel of history. When they hit hard and step on it 10,000 times, they will never be able to rise again. One after another, the dukes and marquises knelt on the ground and cried out in unison, scrambling to show their loyalty. They were afraid that if they were a step too late, they would end up like Suzha and old ancestor Black Buddha, who would be killed by Jiang Tian. Imperial tutor, I'm guilty. I'm a traitor, I've committed a grave sin. This was especially true for the Duke of Westridge, who slapped himself again and again. He claimed that he had been confused for a moment, and was willing to admit his guilt. However, he begged Jiang Tian to spare his family. It turned out that he was worried about being stripped of his title and fief, so he formed an alliance with the proud world sex Suzha. The condition was that Suzha Xiang would help him become the king, and the world-defying stage sect would be worshipped as the national religion, with the support of the entire country. At this point, many of the dukes and marquises had completely given up on resisting. He could no longer care about his own death. All he wanted was to protect his descendants and bloodline. If you agree to bet, you must accept your loss. Aristocratic families were as deep as the sea. Even the rich and powerful families could fight to the death for a city or a pool. What's more, it's a battle in the imperial court. Although there were less than 1,000 participants in this big battle at the imperial tutor's housewarming banquet, they were all top-level battles. The level was extremely high. Most of them were above the soul formation realm. There were also many half-saints and even saints. It involved the dukes, the royal family, and the top-ranked sections. In fact, it was equivalent to an army of 1,000,000 cultivators facing off. It was equivalent to a large-scale war. As the victor, Jiang Tian should naturally carry out a bloodbath. You are indeed unforgivable. I'll spare your descendants. Rest in peace. Jiang Tian said indifferently. He raised his hand and pointed. A loud bang was heard. The trembling Duke of Westridge's body exploded. Sparkling flesh rained down, and broken bones flew in all directions, covering a large area. Saint, please calm down. The dukes trembled in fear. Bastard, did you collude with Crown Prince Yachang and incite Lin Dyer? The Duke of Eastern Gorge also pulled his daughter Long Jushua to kneel down and slapped her a few times. Bastard! I've warned you again and again that the saint saved my life on the 100 Flowers Peak. The Long family has to be loyal in the future. You promised, but I'm willing to accept defeat. I'm willing to commit suicide to atone for my sins. Long Jushua also regretted it at this moment. She smiled miserably and self-destructed her nascent soul, dying an unnatural death. She was extremely beautiful and was known as a genius. Too many people chased after her, and she was too arrogant. She couldn't accept Jiang Tian's humiliation and suppression of her. Every time she thought of it, she felt uneasy in her bedroom. Long Jushua held a grudge in her heart, so she colluded with Crown Prince Yachang and bewitched Lin Dyer. Bastard, it's your turn. Lin Hanqing slapped Lin Dyer's face. Lin Hanqing was angry and didn't hit lightly. Smack. Lin Dyer flew to the ground. A few clear palm prints appeared on her pretty face. Blood seeped out of the corner of her mouth. Her hair was disheveled, and her face was covered in dust. She was in a mess. Mr. Jiang, I know I was wrong. Please accept me. I'm willing to be your slave. I'm willing to follow you. At this moment, Lin Dyer was really scared. After all, in the face of a life and death threat, Jiang Tian even dared to destroy a famous sect. What nobility did she have? She raised her tearful little face and begged for mercy, just like a pug that had seen its master. Lin Dyer was confident that with her beauty, she could move Jiang Tian. However, she found that Jiang Tian was looking at her coldly. It was as if he was looking at a bedbug. There was no desire or warmth in his eyes, only coldness and disgust. As long as you don't kill me, I can do any position. I'll definitely take good care of Bebe and treat her as my own. I promise to be loyal to you. The girl was also panicking. She stuck out her hips and crawled to Jiang Tian. She was a weeping beauty, weak and easily bullied. At this moment, her waist sank and twisted, looking even more slender. Her tempting snow-white and tender chest was also exposed as she spoke incoherently. At this point, is your only capital your beauty? Jiang Tian snorted, his eyes cold and without the slightest ripple. Fang Jinlong shook his head in disappointment. Lin Hanqing's daughter was too stupid. What kind of existence was State Preceptor Xiqing? What kind of woman couldn't she find? Using her beauty to seduce him was simply a bad idea. That day you humiliated the State Preceptor again and again. Have you ever thought of this day? Lin Hanqing looked up to the sky and sighed, lamenting her misfortune and angry at her failure to fight. At first, he wanted Lin Dyer to marry Jiang Tian, but Lin Dyer firmly refused and threatened to kill herself. She looked down on Jiang Tian for being a cultivator from outside the river and bringing along a burden. But now, not only was Jiang Tian the state preceptor, but he also suppressed the entire continent and was a peerless giant. Fairy Qingjue had announced her feelings for him. Princess Mou and the little princess were interested in him. In fact, this was nothing. However, Lin Dyer was so stupid to be instigated and used by Long Jushua and Crown Prince Yachang to stand against Jiang Tian. Now she had ended up in such a miserable state. Who can you blame? I gave you a chance, but you didn't grasp it. Lin Yang also sighed. He didn't want his sister to die. He naturally wanted to persuade Jiang Tian, but he realized that there was nothing to say. After all, Jiang Tian had given Lin Dyer too many chances, but she courted death time and time again. It could be said that now that Jiang Tian had killed Lin Dyer, the Lin family couldn't blame Jiang Tian at all. After all, if not for Jiang Tian's heaven-defying strength, he would have been killed by Lin Dyer long ago. Even if you have other women, I won't be jealous. I just want to be the woman behind you. Lin Dyer hugged Jiang Tian's calf tightly and pressed her full and soft chest against it. At this time Lin Dyer didn't look like the heir of a duke at all. She didn't have the slightest arrogance or reservation, but a pitiful and obedient look, allowing him to do whatever he wanted. Haha, you ugly monster. You still want to seduce me? A toad wants to eat swan meat. Jiang Tian raised his foot and kicked her to the side. You. Lin Dyer was kicked 7 or 8 meters away, and her head was bleeding. She got up and glared at him, not sure if it was a plea or a threat. What are you looking at? Jiang Tian pointed in the air. Chaotic god-shattering finger. Completely restrained, simple and unadorned. A bloody hole appeared in Lin Dyer's forehead, and her divine soul was shattered. She was directly carried by the huge inertia and flew 7 or 8 meters away, knocking over a few tables before falling to the ground. She fell flat on her back, and under her messy skirt, her body was exposed. She was in a sorry state. Her beautiful eyes were still wide open, full of astonishment. She couldn't believe that Jiang Tian could be so ruthless. He didn't have the slightest pity for the fairer sex. He cared about their old relationship and killed her directly. Chapter 2013. Lin Dyer did not know. This was Jiang Tian's past self. He was cruel and merciless, enjoying killing. He did not have as many scruples as Jiang Tian. Deep in the hall, Jiang Tian, who was using the art of deceiving heaven and earth to conceal himself, sighed and closed his eyes. Jiang Tian had wanted to kill Lin Dyer for a long time. As long as Jiang Tian released his past self, he would not be under Jiang Tian's control. It would be meaningless for him to stop him now. My past self would definitely find a suitable opportunity. Duke of Beijiang, it's your turn, Jiang Tian laughed. Imperial tutor, I'm innocent. The Duke of Beijiang was so frightened that he knelt on the ground and said pitifully, Imperial tutor, I was completely fooled by Brother Dehe. I didn't know that you wanted to abolish the feudal system. I thought you only wanted to reform the hidden dragon trials. So I didn't plan to rebel at all. I was thinking of how to give a gift to let my successor have an advantage in the hidden dragon trials, and keep my title and land. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Do you think I'm blind? When I was besieged by the sect leaders, You laughed and gloated. Passing me, Jiang Tian laughed out loud and tapped. The Duke of Beijiang did not even have time to scream before his body exploded. His divine treasures were shattered, and his deity body was crushed into powder. This time, all the feudal lords were terrified. After all, they all wanted to keep their fiefs and titles. When Jiang Tian was surrounded, they all rejoiced in his misfortune. According to this standard, except for Fang Jinlong and Lin Hanqing, everyone else would not be able to escape death. Saint, please don't be angry. Spare my life. I know my mistakes and will definitely repent. Imperial tutor, please have mercy on me and forgive my sins. The Duke of Black Fox and the rest were all scared out of their wits. They knelt on the ground and kowtowed. I'm Guhi from the Ancient Medicine Hall. I'm Wang Qing, the Grand Elder of the Nine Mysteries sect. I'm Lian Huahun, Saint Qianma. I'm here to see Saint Xiqing. At that instant, a voice could be heard as a few cultivators landed on the ground. I, along with the princes and dukes, greet the seniors. Seeing this, Eastern Lu's expression froze, and he hurriedly kowtowed. His attitude was very respectful, and even a little nervous. Even eldest Princess Mou, who was known as the Empire's goddess of war, bowed in admiration. After all of the mighty figures of this continent were returned to Void Stage saints. They were far too powerful. Your Majesty, you're too polite. I'm just a commoner. How could I deserve such great respect? Guhi looked like a middle-aged man with sword-like eyebrows. He hurriedly half-knelt on the ground to show his respect. Then he held Eastern Lu's arm with both hands and helped him up. This person had an elegant and gentle temperament, and his attitude was kind and humble. He didn't have the domineering aura and fierceness of one of the top experts on the continent, the ruler of a holy land. When people faced him, they felt as if they were bathed in a spring breeze, and they immediately felt a sense of familiarity. This had something to do with the Ancient Medicine Hall's cultivation technique and mission. Although their cultivation was not bad, their mission was to help the world and the people. They did not like to kill and bully the weak. You deserve it, you deserve it. The Ancient Medicine Hall is the pillar of the continent, the leader of the righteous sections. This junior has always been full of admiration. Eastern Lu greeted the mighty figures of the sects one by one. He talked and chatted happily, but his heart was beating like a drum. He was on tenterhooks, and the back of his clothes was drenched in cold sweat. At this moment, Jiang Tian seemed to have the intention of declaring war on the sections. After destroying several large sects in succession, these mighty figures of the sects were very likely here to cause trouble for Jiang Tian. After the greetings, Guhi cupped his fists and said, I have a matter to discuss with State Advisor Xiqing. Could it be that we're really going to war? At this moment, not only Eastern Lu, but also Mou, Dongfangying, Fairy Qingjue, and the others' hearts were hanging in the air. The dukes were also trembling in fear, afraid that they would be implicated. Everyone, do you want to fight with this seat? Jiang Tian chuckled, but there was already a hint of fear in his voice. The reason why he started a massacre was because abolishing the dukedom system was secondary. More importantly, he wanted to blow this matter up and conceal the clues that led to Yang Dingtian's death. He didn't want the undying emperor above the nine heavens to see through his identity with the clues of Huanglinger. Only then would he be able to jump out of the chessboard of fate and not be a chess piece, controlling his own fate. But in fact, the destruction of so many large sects was already sufficient, and his objective had been achieved. At this moment, if the undying emperor were to observe the changes in the lower realm from the nine heavens, the state advisor's feast was like a bonfire that was blazing and eye-catching. Meanwhile, Yang Dingtian's death was like a spark that was dim and indistinct. It was impossible for the undying emperor to detect it. At this moment, there was no need to fight with Guhi. Furthermore, apart from this deity and Daowu making a move to defend against the enemy, he had no chance of winning. But this deity and Daowu had to ensure that the information was concealed, and it was impossible for us to openly help him. He said this because he was fulfilling his duty and was acting out his final act. He maintained his wild and tyrannical, and disregarding the heroes of the world persona. That's not true. Guhi looked at Jiang Tian and revealed a shocked expression. He cupped his fist and spoke respectfully and warmly. This old man had always wanted to maintain the order of the Saint Origin world. He had worked hard for 1,000 years, but the Saint Origin world was still ruled by the strong and the weak were treated as ants. There were endless massacres. Lord State Advisor's reform was an internal affair of the empire. Suzhou and the others shouldn't have interfered and shouldn't have used their martial strength to suppress others. Their skills were inferior, and in the end they were killed by the State Advisor. They deserved it and couldn't blame others. You are quite sensible. Past self Jiang Tian smiled, feeling as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his heart. But Taoist Siqing, you shouldn't have killed the innocent and implicated the sects behind them. Those disciples and clansmen might not know anything and had no enmity with you. Wouldn't it be unjust for them to die so miserably? Gu He's expression was filled with regret as he spoke earnestly. Taoist, you have to understand that there are different factions among the human race. On the continent, there are sects and countries. Within a country, there are royal families, feudal lords, and aristocratic families. Even the territories of the feudal lords are divided into 3, 6, and 9 classes. But no matter what, we belong to the human race. And once there is too much internal strife in the human race, then the demon race and even the devil race will take advantage of the situation. And the master of this world will no longer be us. Who knows how many humans will fall into the abyss of suffering? Saint Qianma also smiled bitterly. Saint Siqing, these days, we have monitored many demonic qi cracks that have shown signs of unrest. Demons and monsters have already begun to invade, and the situation is not good. It is very likely that there will be an unprecedented war. At this time, the human race, whether it is the empire or the sects, really shouldn't have any conflicts and should unite against the outside world. Jiang Tian knew that Gu He, Saint Qianma, and the others were not hypocritical. They were sincere. They were the top leaders of the human race on the continent, the pillars that supported the heavens. Naturally, they considered the safety and prosperity of the entire human race on the continent. But Jiang Tian knew that according to the historical process, the human race would still prosper, the demon race would be suppressed, and the devil world would not be able to infiltrate. Secondly, he was not a giant of the continent. He was not even a native. Of course, he did not consider so much. He only cared about the group of people he valued the most. I know that I have sinned deeply. Jiang Tian bowed slightly and said in a low voice, Fortunately, the marquee system has been abolished. It can be considered a wish. From today onwards, I will seal my saber and not interfere with the affairs of the world. I will face the wall and reflect on my mistakes. I will chant scriptures and praise Buddha every day. I will expiate the vengeful spirits that died tragically in my hands. I hope that they will ascend to paradise as soon as possible. The moment Jiang Tian said that, everyone was in an uproar. Chapter 2014. He actually wants to resign from his position as the Grand Tutor. No one had expected this. Jiang Tian had always been strong and not weaker than others. He had the disposition to dominate the world. Yet he suddenly announced that he would resign from his position as the Grand Tutor. This was too unbelievable. Could it be that he was pressured by the sages? But Gu He and the rest did not show any intention of threatening Jiang Tian. Fairy Qingjue panicked and hurriedly said, Fellow Taoist Siqing, the seniors did not come with this intention. The Grand Elder of the 9 Mysteries sect smiled and said, Indeed. Fellow Taoist Siqing, we came to find you mainly to discuss the establishment of the human race. We will suppress the demons together and resist the invasion of the demons. Saint Qianma said, We plan to establish the human race alliance with the sect masters of the 5 sacred grounds, and an empire representative. And fellow Taoist Siqing is the best candidate for the empire representative. The empire representative can mobilize the resources of the various countries. Even the monarch has to listen to his orders. Seeing that Jiang Tian was unmoved, Gu He said, That's right. Fellow Taoist Siqing, you have to understand that the greater the responsibility, the greater the ability. Moreover, what you said about reciting scriptures and praising Buddha is just a lie. If you really want to atone for your sins, why don't you do your part to protect the human race? Oh my God! This is really like a fish leaping over the dragon's gate, becoming a giant of the continent and looking down on the world. Everyone was shocked. This was equivalent to raising Jiang Tian to the status of a giant of the 5 sacred grounds. Even the grand tutors and monarchs of the various empires would have to admit defeat. After all, there were many empires, but only one empire representative was qualified to talk to Gu He and the other giants on equal terms. Grand Tutor, you must stay. Without you, the empire will not be at peace. You are the pillar of the empire, the stabilizing needle. Eastern Lu and the rest tried their best to persuade him to stay, and even knelt on the ground to beg. They had feelings and rational considerations. Jiang Tian became the empire representative and had great power. Who would dare to offend the Eastern Empire? After all, this was his homeland. Moreover, Jiang Tian could mobilize a huge amount of resources in the future. Even if it was just a little bit, it would be enough for the Eastern Empire to eat until they were full. No. I have made up my mind. The past me, Jiang Tian said with emotion. I know my sins, but I'm also willing to bear the infamy. In order to give up my kindness, I use my sins and blood to open up a path for the common people and the common people, a path to rise. Let me bear all of this alone. In the next moment, Jiang Tian waved his hand and took out the Grand Preceptor's seal, the scepter, and many other ritual items from his storage ring, and placed them on the table. This is the strategy that I left for the Imperium. It is called the Spark New Policy. I hope that you will study it carefully. Jiang Tian once again took out a jade slip. He tapped the air and it floated into Eastern Lu's hand. Sir, are you really leaving? Eastern Lu solemnly accepted the jade scroll, his face full of reluctance. I'm leaving. Jiang Tian sighed and said seriously, Emperor, I owe the Lin family a great debt of gratitude. I want the Eastern Empire to guarantee them 100 years of glory and 1,000 years of peace. Do you agree? Of course I agree to this condition. Moreover, I will never violate it for generations. If I do, I will be at the mercy of Sage Xiqing. Eastern Lu knelt down, followed by Dongfang Ding and Dongfang Li. Farewell everyone. Jiang Tian nodded with satisfaction and glanced at the crowd. Suddenly he waved his sleeve and wrapped Jiang Beibai and Dahe in it. He soared into the sky and disappeared from everyone's sight in the blink of an eye. This he actually left without saying goodbye? The lofty Grand Preceptor is second only to one person, and above millions of people. He abandoned it just like that? He didn't just abandon the position of Grand Preceptor. He was a giant on this continent. The crowd couldn't believe it and was dumbfounded. But they didn't know. To Jiang Tian, Saint Origin World was just a transit station on his way to the Central Galaxy. It was just a temporary stop. His mission in the Eastern Empire was almost complete. He came here to repay the kindness of the Lin family in his previous life, and to make up for the regret of the Lin family's destruction. Now the Lin family had received his personal teachings. The Purple Marquis was destroyed and the feudal system was abolished. The Lin family would be able to establish themselves in the Eastern Empire with the cultivation methods he taught them. In addition, there was the development trend of the Eastern Empire. Jiang Tian's abolition of the feudal system was equivalent to removing the shackles of development. The Eastern Empire would show an incomparably vigorous vitality and ambition. Under such circumstances, the pantheon of demons seemed powerful, but in fact, it had fallen into a disadvantageous position. Jiang Tian planned to stand by and watch the suppression of the demon race's rebellion. On one hand, he had confidence in the Eastern Empire and the Lin family. On the other hand, he wanted to destroy his enemies from his previous life and avenge his previous humiliation. For example, the Purple Marquis, Li Yichen, and other enemies had been mostly eliminated. Jiang Tian wasn't in a hurry to deal with the remaining enemies, such as Yan Nanxian. Yan Nanxian was indeed the culprit behind the destruction of the Lin family, but that was also because of the grudge between him and Yan Nanxian. Yan Nanxian failed to kill him and took his anger out on the Lin family. However, the fate of this life was completely different from his previous life. Yan Nanxian would not endanger the Lin family. Thirdly, he had to find Huang Linger and protect her. This was more or less done. Finally, He had to wait for the birth of that treasure and take it for himself. He had to take an important step and step into the divine transformation realm. And this had become Jiang Tian's top priority. After all, he had already walked the path of becoming immortal for a long time. Everything was ready except for the east wind. Mr. Jiang. Wait. I have something to say to you. Fairy Qingjue, eldest princess Mou, and Dongfang all soared into the air and chased after Jiang Tian. However, how could their movement speed compare to Jiang Tian's? Especially Dongfang. Before they even left the city, they had already disappeared. Mr. Our Dongfang family has yet to repay your kindness. You have been here for less than a year. She looked up at the direction Jiang Tian left in, her beautiful eyes filled with tears, her face full of longing and reluctance. The hidden dragon trials are still waiting for you to preside over. And you're leaving just like that. Dongfang Mou chased out of the city and could not see Jiang Tian's figure. He could not help but turn pale. Even Fairy Qingjue could not see Jiang Tian after chasing for 1,000 miles. And this only took a few flicks of a finger. How can this be? You said that you want to become Dao companions with me, but you actually left so ambiguously. Could it be that what you said before was all a lie? Fairy Qingjue stood in the void, her clothes fluttering. Her expression was disappointed, and her eyes were filled with resentment and sorrow. 2 lines of clear tears slowly flowed down her jade-white cheeks. How vast was her divine sense! It swept across the vast sky and covered the vast earth, covering everything, no matter big or small. However, there was no trace of Jiang Tian. Half a day later, Jiang Tian came to the east of the Dongfang Empire. At the edge of the Great Boundary Canyon, on top of a mountain peak in the evil-infested ridge, his vast divine sense suddenly spread out and peeped into the canyon. Chapter 2015. The evil-infested ridge was filled with ominous mountains and rivers. In the dense forest, there were towering trees that reached up to 100 zhang. The ground was filled with withered branches and withered leaves. The pine trees gently swayed without any wind. The needles were like teeth. The mottled bark was like the skin of a dying old man. It was horrifying and disgusting. All kinds of evil and dangerous auras filled the air. One could faintly see extremely tyrannical devil beasts roaming around. Devil beasts were originally demonic beasts, but because they were infected by evil energy, they mutated and transformed. They became even more violent and crazy. There was no beauty to speak of. Fuck, I fell into a trap. Standing on top of the evil-infested ridge, and peeking at the Grand Canyon, past self Jiang Tian's heart was filled with evil thoughts. His heartbeat sped up, and his mind was filled with hatred. He hated the heavens for being too fair, hated the earth for carrying things, hated people for being happy, hated things for not being his own, hated karma, hated fate for not being benevolent, hated that he didn't slaughter enough. He hated that he couldn't destroy all living things and kill the world. In the midst of his hatred, past self Jiang Tian's thoughts and ideas were all in chaos. It was as if his personality had split into 12,960, and each one was completely different. I should stay and spend a good night with Fairy Qingjue. With the mortal world as my companion, I can live freely and freely. I can ride a horse and enjoy the prosperity of this world. I already have Zhao Xueqing. How can I be half-hearted? Plus, I have to jump out of the chess game of the 9 heavens and escape the fate of being a chess piece. I have to be the director of my own destiny. This is too hard to endure. Fighting against the heavens, fighting against the earth, and resisting the giants above the 9 heavens. Why not surrender? Just lie down and be an ant. Isn't that better? Immortal Emperor, you are like a mouse hiding up there and playing tricks with your father. If you have the guts, then come down and kill me. Ah. Eat your mother, trash. Don't you know how to speak the language of the strong? Ah. Calm down. This is an illusion. You are about to have a split personality. How terrifying. If this is an illusion, then everything before is an illusion. You don't have a previous life, and you don't have a rebirth in this life. You have always been in Linzhou's mental hospital for treatment. Past self Jiang Tian painfully held his head. More than 12,000 voices were arguing with each other in his mind. It was as messy as a pot of boiling porridge. Those who had not experienced this would not be able to understand this kind of pain. In the heavens and on the earth, I am the only one who can control them. His voice was like thunder, like the evening drum and the morning bell, echoing in Jiang Tian's ears, turning into waves of divine sense, suppressing the evil thoughts in his heart. Was it because I, Jiang Tian, had arrived in time? His eyes were indifferent, like the eternal blue sky hanging high in the sky. His mouth spat out thunderous sounds, like the sound of the great Tao. He emitted divine sense fluctuations, helping me, Jiang Tian, to resolve the devil will. My spiritual undulations are even more profound. It seems emotionless, but it also seems emotionless. In his eyes, no one was inferior, and no one was more noble. Heaven and earth were heartless, and there was no difference. Tao was divine will rippled and turned into talismans surrounded by the aura of primal chaos, emitting an aura of creation. On these chaos talismans, there seemed to be Taoist lords and Buddhas sitting upright, with one hand pointing to the sky and the other pointing to the earth. In the heavens and on the earth, only I am supreme. Clang. A sound like a dragon's roar was heard. Behind him, Jiang Beibai and Dahe followed. Jiang Tian's original body had arrived. His gaze was deep, his expression was calm, and he hugged a guqin. He used his heart as the guqin, his 7 emotions as the strings, and his true intent to play, creating a soundless celestial sound, resonating with the others' hearts. Central Pine Illumination. A song was played. Jiang Tian felt that the surrounding scene had changed. It was no longer fierce mountains and rivers, nor was it haunted by devil qi and evil qi. A gurgling clear spring flowed past the spotlessly white stones. A round moon hung high in the pine forest, and a cool breeze blew, causing the pine trees to undulate and also his heart to sway. Soon after, overlooking the 9 heavens, boundless chant, stargazing ocean, heaven toppling over. Guqin sounds were heard, and one song after another was played. Fresh and refined, magnificent, and transcendent scenes appeared in Jiang Tian's heart, interfering with his soul, purging the evil thoughts in my heart, clearing my heart and calming my mind. External demons cannot invade, evil thoughts cannot enter, and worries are purified. Demonic Tao heart. I, Jiang Tian, shouted loudly, shaking the surroundings. The chaos became orderly, the filth became pure, and there was a clear glaze of light everywhere. Swallow. Jiang Tian was slightly stunned, and he shouted in a low voice, grabbing hold of the short moment of clarity. In his sea of consciousness, the soul-devouring demonic god suddenly opened its eyes, quickly swallowing the many distracting thoughts, absorbing and fusing with the personality that had just been split. Phew. After a while, Jiang Tian's face regained its calmness, and he slowly exhaled. The depravity, evil, and cruelty seemed to have become stronger. But his Tao heart was also more stable. Demonic Tao heart. This was a very strange state. Jiang Tian was closer to the devil qi, as if they were one, and he had even entered the state of demonization. Of course, his physical body and dermic powers would not be contaminated by the devil qi. But strangely, he maintained a Tao heart that was as calm as a rock. His thoughts were not disturbed or affected by external demons, and he did not lose himself or become confused. Since his Tao heart was not confused, he could combine knowledge and action, and his actions came from his heart. This place is really terrifying. Main body, are you really going to take that fiend as an opportunity for you to break through to the soul formation level? Jiang Tian sighed with emotion as he looked at the great threshold canyon. It was like a centipede with stitches, twisted and hideous. Its mouth was 1,000 feet wide and 1,000 feet long. It was silent and there was no other scenery, only an indescribable darkness. It seemed to be connected to the netherworld and the extremely terrifying fiend world universe. Even though Jiang Tian's Tao heart was more stable and heartless, it was difficult for him to look away when he looked at it. He was directly swallowed, and there was a trace of fear in his heart. He vaguely felt that it was a slightly rotating vortex, a huge vortex with no end in sight. It was far more terrifying than the abyssal fiend dragon from before. It's okay. I have a way to restrain this thing. Jiang Tian's true body calmly glanced at the canyon, then let out a soft cry of surprise and said, This thing seems to have changed. I'm afraid it's going to be born soon. Maybe it'll only take 3 to 5 years. It's going to be born in advance. We should set up defenses here from now on. Only then can we seize the initiative." Jiang Tian revealed a serious expression. His clothes fluttered in the wind, making him look like an immortal. "No need." Jiang Tian shook his head and said calmly, "I'm going to continue to transform into a mortal. I'll leave behind a few surveillance Dharma artifacts to keep track of the movement of this thing." "Is there anything else to discuss?" Jiang Tian asked. "No." Jiang Tian shook his head. "Let's fuse," Dao said in a low voice. "We'll use the art of deceiving heaven and earth to hide our aura. We won't be able to do it for too long." "Okay, fuse." Jiang Tian smiled. The three of them reversed their art of deceiving heaven and earth at the same time, and fused into one. "Dad, this place is so scary. Let's go." Jiang Beibei said softly. Okay, I'll bring you to see an acquaintance." Jiang Tian smiled. "Who? Your Auntie Linger?" Chapter 2016. The easternmost part of the Saint Origin continent. Luoying sect. Immortal mountains and divine towers floated in the air. Rich spiritual energy fell like a waterfall, and vast magical power floated like a waterfall, giving people a beautiful and vast feeling. Below it, there were mortal cities. The buildings were grand and imposing, and the aura of civilization was strong. On the streets, a large number of cultivators and mortals came and went. The traffic was endless, and there was a hubbub of voices. It was abnormally prosperous. Here a large number of outer sect businesses were gathered. They worked day and night came. The entire sect, inside and outside, was filled with fireworks and silver flowers, and was brightly lit. Today was the annual anniversary celebration of the Luoying sect. In Wuzhou City, a large number of celebration activities were also held. In the city along a vast river, there was a dragon boat race, a lantern show and a fireworks show. The two sides of the river were brightly lit, and pedestrians were shuttling. A group of male and female cultivators restrained their magical power, and turned into mortals. They walked along the riverbank and played. When they saw something delicious, they went in to buy a few skewers, grilled fish, and the like. Occasionally, there were exquisite handmade products, such as rouge and face powder, which attracted their attention. A woman walked in the middle. She had an elegant temperament, and her face was beautiful and peerless, as if she was otherworldly. Along the way, she attracted a lot of attention. Look at the fireworks over there. It's so beautiful." A female cultivator pulled the beautiful girl and pointed to the opposite side of the river bank. Huang Linger looked up and saw that on the opposite side of the river, a cluster of fireworks rose up. It was like 1,000 flowers blooming on a night of the east wind. The light was like a river, and the stars were like rain. Beautiful. Countless onlookers saw this scene and rejoiced, revealing smiles. The fragrance of precious horses and carts filled the road. The sound of the flute moved, the light of the jade pot spun, and the night was full of fish and dragons. However, Huang Linger suddenly turned her head and looked to the side. In a corner where the lights were waning, there was a lone person sitting there. Beside that person was a flag with the words "Waiting for Fate" written on it. Is he a fortune teller? Cultivators could sense the heaven and earth, and naturally had premonitions about the changes in the world. They could act on a whim or feel uneasy, and they could seek good fortune and avoid disaster. Naturally, his standard was far beyond that of a normal fortune teller. But for some reason, this time, Huang Linger walked in front of the fortune teller as if she was possessed by gods and devils. Even her several senior and junior sisters couldn't stop her. The light was dim. The fortune teller's face was old and his body was stooped. His eyes were dim and turbid, as if he had already lost his sight. However, Huang Linger had a very familiar feeling. She was stunned for a moment and didn't know what to say. "Hey, fortune teller. My little sister is here for fortune telling." One of the senior sisters was helpless in her heart. She could only cross her arms and speak fiercely. "You're mistaken, I'm not a fortune teller." The old man coughed and smiled. "Waiting for fate so that you can swindle others. If that's not a fortune teller, Then what is it? Senior sister scoffed. I'm here, waiting for my lover from 10,000 years ago. I owe the people of 2 lifetimes. The old man said in a hoarse voice. Your former lover? Owes the people of 2 lifetimes? Doesn't this mean that you're a reincarnated person? Moreover, your previous life was 10,000 years ago. After you reincarnated, you even saw your former lover. I'm afraid you'll have to reverse time and space. Do you think you're a mighty figure in the celestial world? Reverse time. The senior and junior sisters were all mocking him. As cultivators, they were not unfamiliar with rebirth and the like, but there were very few memories left after reincarnation. Reversing time and space to be reborn was too difficult. It was simply the biggest joke in the world. Do you mean that your lover will appear? Look, don't I look like it? The senior sister walked out. Although she was not on the 10 Beauties painting, she was still an enchanting and troublesome figure. Her waist was slender, her chest was high, and her beautiful face was hopeless and unfavorable. Many male cultivators were fascinated by her. In the end, her flirting was useless. The old man shook his head and raised his finger to point at Huang Linger. She's my lover from 10,000 years ago. Ah. Everyone was surprised. Me? Huang Linger blushed and said awkwardly. The old man nodded calmly. Old blind man, how dare you think about my junior sister? Open your blind eyes and look carefully. My junior sister is the most beloved disciple of the Luoying sect leader Lian Huahan. Moreover, she's peerlessly beautiful and famous. She's on the 100 Flowers chart and the 10 Beauties painting. Are you worthy? The senior sister raised her hand and pretended to hit him. Get out of here, or I'll kill you. Fairy, please forgive me. It's true that the old man made a mistake. This fairy is not her. My lover is billions of light years away from the Milky Way. But the old man doesn't have the heart to tease me. The old man seemed to be afraid and quickly apologized. Senior sister, don't be angry. The old man was just joking with me. Huang Linger said softly. Humph. I'll give you face. Otherwise I'll stab him to death with a finger. Only then did the senior sister give up. Old man, do I look like your lover? Perhaps she had nothing to do. Huang Linger actually squatted down in front of the old man, supported her chin with her hand, looked at the old man's old face, and said softly, Old man, can you tell me the story of you and her? Ling, or what's so good about the story of a mortal old man? You can stay here and tease him. We'll go to the front first. The few senior sisters were not interested in listening to him. After saying goodbye, they strolled forward. I was born in a big family. I lived a life of luxury, but because of various reasons, I was exiled by the family. I gave up on myself and spent my days in the martial world, enjoying the pleasures of life. The old man spoke slowly. His face was calm, and his voice was vicissitudes of life. It was as if he instantly pulled people back to 10,000 years ago. At this time, a girl from a scholarly family, in order to pay off her father's debt, made a contract with me and became my contract lover. It seemed to be a business deal, but this girl actually had feelings for me, which I didn't expect. Huang Linger was suspicious from the beginning. Hearing this, her delicate body couldn't help but tremble violently. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears, and she looked at the old man with infinite affection. She could already confirm that this old man was Jiang Tian. However, she had experienced too many twists and turns. She was no longer that naive and innocent girl. She instantly understood that with Jiang Tian's personality, if he didn't encounter an unimaginably strong enemy and an unsolvable dilemma, why would he hide himself like this? Therefore, she did not say a word and listened to the old man's narration. There was no need for Huang Linger to ask. Jiang Tian also told Huang Linger an important message as if he was telling a story. Jiang Tian went on an expedition to the ruins of immortality, reached the South Gate 2 stars, and won a complete victory. The South Gate 2 stars was now a colony of Earth. The Beta Demon clan's invasion of Earth failed. The entire Milky Way was centered around the solar system. It's okay. Our home is still there, our homeland is still there, and our old friends are all well. Hearing this, Huang Linger's heart surged. Tears flowed down, and her heart was filled with infinite sweetness. Chapter 2017. All right, young lady, the story is over. I should be leaving to look for my previous lover. The old man kept the flag while trembling and spoke with a smile. Mister, take care. Will you be back? Huang Linger stood up and couldn't help but shed tears. They rolled down like broken pearls. At this moment, she had already thought through many things. Yang Dingtian must have been killed by Jiang Tian. However, in order to prevent that unparalleled giant from finding out Jiang Tian's true identity, he had no choice but to start a massacre at the state preceptor's housewarming banquet. She didn't know how much risk Jiang Tian had taken for this perfect plan. It was practically a narrow escape. Of course I will be back. This story isn't over yet. I want to give it a very happy ending. The old man smiled and staggered as he turned and walked towards the distance. Master. Immediately after, a young man and a young lady supported him. This is Bebe and Big Black. They are actually here too. Jiang Bebe had already changed her appearance and had grown up a lot. Big Black had also been reborn and had transformed into a human form. However, as though they were telepathic, Huang Linger immediately recognized the two of them. She was extremely excited and was filled with the pleasant surprise of meeting an old friend in a foreign land. And, Mister, I will wait for you to come back and tell me the second half of the story. Give me a perfect ending. Huang Linger looked at Jiang Tian's departing figure and muttered. Jiang Tian, Jiang Bebe, and Big Black disappeared once again. A few days later, Jiang Tian, Jiang Bebe, and Big Black, who had changed their appearances again, rented a small shop in Wuxia City for 8 low-grade crystals and lived in seclusion again. To become a god, one had to become a mortal first. One had to experience life and walk in the mortal world to build a solid foundation. In fact, Jiang Tian had already walked very far on the path of becoming immortal. However, he still wanted to walk for a while longer. He also took advantage of this period of time to make ample preparations for the birth of that treasure and the upcoming chaotic world. If the previous path of becoming immortal in the Eastern Empire was to experience the height of the imperial court, then the upcoming path should be to experience the vastness of the pugilistic world. This time, he was a mortal without any cultivation. He was truly a small hermit who lived in the wilderness and a big hermit who lived in the city. The shop that Jiang Tian and the others rented was not on the main street, but in a remote alley. It was very remote and had very few people. In fact, due to its small size, it would be difficult to find it if one didn't look carefully. But Jiang Tian didn't mind. Jiang Tian opened a medicine store, so he would also take care of some simple injuries. The herbs that were sold had very thin spiritual energy. In this world, they were classified as herbs. The guests were naturally not cultivators. They were basically all the poor people in the surroundings, hunters, fishermen, woodcutters, and of course, there were also some craftsmen who worked for the outer sect. Jiang Tian was a doctor and pharmacist, and Dahe acted as a waiter. Jiang Bebe did some small chores as much as she could. In the blink of an eye, 2 months had passed. In the past 2 months, Jiang Tian was like an ordinary pharmacist. When the weather was good, he would go to the surrounding mountains to collect herbs. When he came back, he would cut the herbs, dry them, work at sunrise and rest at sunset. Without any cultivation, he was just like a real mortal. The surrounding neighbors also knew that the new master and his servants had come. The master was dressed as a middle-aged scholar. His surname was Jiang and he never mentioned his name. He only said that he was an insignificant person who was not worth mentioning. Although he was not good at talking, he was extremely humble and kind, his medical skills were good, and the charge was reasonable. Chun Laoqi's chronic scabby head was cured, and he only charged 3 low-grade crystal stones. On this day, Jiang Tian was picking out the weeds among the medicinal herbs behind the counter when a groaning sound rang out. Soon after, the white wooden door that had been exposed to the wind and rain until its paint peeled off was pushed open. A young man with a dignified appearance limped in and cried out in pain. Mr. Jiang, I'm so unlucky. My calf was bitten by a lynx. It hurts. Hazy, hurry up. Jiang Tian and Dahe quickly helped the young man sit down in a chair. When he rolled up his trouser legs, Jiang Bebe had already brought a jar of liquor. Jiang Tian said, You have to bear with it. The lynx's saliva is poisonous. I have to bleed and disinfect your blood. Okay. Okay. The young man took a rolled towel from Dahe, stuffed it into his mouth, and nodded heavily. He thought, Mr. Jiang is really kind, but why does this guy named Hazy smile so maliciously? It seems that he is waiting for me to make a fool of myself. Don't even think about it. Even if I pass out, I won't cry out. The young man made up his mind seriously. Jiang Tian began to squeeze the young man's wound, squeezing out half a bowl of black blood, disinfecting it with liquor, and then suturing it with catgut before applying ointment to the young man. Young man, you are quite tough. You didn't make a sound. Don't do strenuous exercise for a week. Jiang Tian smiled and said, Of course. A man will bleed and sweat, but not cry. In fact, the young man was in so much pain that tears came out. Hearing this, he grinned and squinted, and tears rolled down his cheeks. At this time, a middle-aged couple rushed in. Sir, thank you very much. How much is it? I will pay you. The woman looked at the child with concern and asked a few questions. Seeing that the child was fine, she solemnly thanked Jiang Tian. You're welcome. You don't have to pay. It's just a small matter. It's just ordinary herbs. Jiang Tian shook his head. How can I accept it? Thank you so much. The woman bowed again and thanked him. I told you not to go. Why did you still go? I tried to persuade you, but you didn't listen. Good words can't persuade a man who deserves to die. The man looked rough, with long hands and feet and calluses on his palms. He was wearing a leopard skin vest and rough boots made of wild boar skin. He seemed to be a hunter. He scolded the young man with a serious face. He probably said that there were a lot of lynx and leopards in the valley. He had warned the young man before, but the young man still went. The young man had a look of disdain. He rolled his eyes and argued with his father. Fierce, fierce. The child is injured, and you only know how to be fierce. It has nothing to do with you. He just wants to become a good hunter as soon as possible. When the mother saw this, she suddenly threw a tantrum at her husband. I am doing this for his own good. I'm afraid something will happen to him. In front of Sir, you should at least give me some face. The man's face turned red, but he didn't dare to refute. He held it in for a long time before he said embarrassedly, a typical henpecked husband. There was no running away. The woman snorted with a cold face. When she turned to Jiang Tian, she had a smile on her face. Mr. Jiang, if you don't mind, come and have lunch with us. I've brewed fruit wine for half a year. It's not inferior to the ones in the restaurants outside. The woman was very grateful to Jiang Tian and wanted to repay him. Yes, Mr. Jiang, you must come. I just hunted a mountain deer and sold the rest. Only one leg is left. Let's braise it. I also soaked fresh antler and deer blood with wine. It's very nutritious. The man also laughed heartily. An indescribable emotion rose in Jiang Tian's heart. It was different from when he interacted with Lin Hanqing and his son in the Lin residence. It had been a long time since he had experienced the warmth and kindness of strangers who had met by chance, the simple warmth of mortals. Okay. I'm also a lazy person and don't like to cook. It would be impolite to refuse. Jiang Tian agreed with a smile. Chapter 2018. The hunter's house was diagonally opposite, less than half a mile away. Speaking of which, he and Jiang Tian could be considered neighbors. The courtyard of the house was not small. There were some wooden dummies, stone locks, knives, spears, sticks, and so on in the yard. This hunter often practiced with swords and spears, training his muscles and bones, and strengthening his body. This woman was young and had an ordinary appearance, but she was very capable and hardworking. The floor and stove were very clean, and her clothes had been starched and dried. Although the items in the house were very old, they were all wiped until they shone brightly. She was the kind of person who had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. From many details, it could be seen that she loved her husband and child deeply. The child was well behaved, and the couple loved each other dearly. In the yard, the young man was lying on a recliner, bragging to Jiang Beibei about his hunting results. The man accompanied Jiang Tian to drink tea and chat. They talked about some stories in Jianghu and interesting things on the street. Dahe helped the woman in the kitchen and called her big sister, in a very affectionate way. Soon the banquet was set up. On the rough wooden table, there were mountain deer legs, wild rabbits, pheasants, and home-brewed fruit wine. The table was full of dazzling things. Next to the bonfire, there was half a wild boar. Its hair had been removed, and its skin was brushed with a layer of wild honey. It was roasted with fruit tree wood, and it was golden brown and fragrant. The hunter, Tai Nyo, smiled honestly and invited Mr. Jiang to take a seat. During this period, Jiang Tian stopped fasting and ate normally. Originally, since Jiang Tian was going to become immortal, he also hoped that Dahe would walk on the road of becoming immortal. He also needed to eat. However, this boy had not eaten or fasted. He secretly ate elixirs in the middle of the night, so he despised ordinary food. However, at this time, when he saw such a sumptuous meal, he couldn't help drooling. Jiang Tian ate the home-cooked meal that he hadn't eaten for a long time, and drank the fruit wine that the couple was proud of. For the first time, he felt very peaceful. He seemed to have forgotten that the powerful people above the ninth heaven were coveting him, that Zhao Xueqing was taken away, that he had fought against the heavens, that he had forgotten his homeland, and that he had forgotten the cruel and bloody battles in his previous and current lives. At this moment he was just Mr. Jiang, who was filling prescriptions and treating illnesses. He was making a living in this strange city with his daughter and a servant. In this glorious era, in the prosperous Saint Origin world, he was willing to be a nobody without any cultivation base and end his life in peace. However, his magic power was recovering 10 times faster than before. In fact, Sherwa was also injured in the battle with Suzhou and the others. After all, Suzhou was a true return to Void Stage Sage. Under normal circumstances, if Jiang Tian wanted to kill Suzhou alone, it would be a long and arduous battle. However, at that time, the late Jiang Tian wanted to show his divinity in front of the masses and intimidate others. He did not hesitate to burn his own blood essence to kill him in one strike. The price he paid was also disastrous. When the past self, and Tao self merged into one, the injuries would also be transferred to Jiang Tian's body. The truth was that his 3 nascent soul flowers had already withered, and were on the verge of withering. However, at this moment, the petals were glowing and leveling up again, advancing towards their peak state. This wine was indeed good wine. It had the sweetness of the fruit, the coldness of the spring water, and the heat of the wine. From this day onwards, Jiang Tian's life had an additional wine flask with a yellow skin gourd. When he was picking herbs, treating illnesses, or brewing medicine, he would take a sip of the sweet and sour fruit wine. There would always be fruit wine in the flask. If the flask was almost empty, Ahu would run back home to fill it up and send it over. Occasionally, if the hunter Tai Nyo had some good food, he would cook it and call Jiang Tian's family over for a meal. He could also see that this Mr. Jiang's medical skills were very high and he was kind. However, no one was perfect. He also had a flaw, which was that he was extremely lazy. Jiang Tian would only cook every few days when he felt like it. Most of the time he would just buy some meat and eat it with a pot of hot tea. The dust on the stove was as thick as a finger. Therefore, he didn't give Jiang Tian ingredients. Instead, he would call Jiang Tian to eat it. To Jiang Tian, this period of life was like a bowl of spring water. There was a hint of sweetness in the plain. This is the real transcendent mortal. Jiang Tian completely restrained his magic power. He even allowed his body to accept the erosion of time and the consequences of aging. He felt the gravity of the earth and completely forgot that he was a cultivator. However, in his heart, there was a sense of cleanliness that washed away all distracting thoughts. It was light and clean. Every morning, Jiang Tian would wake up early in the morning. He would carry the medicine basket and go to the nearby forest to collect herbs. If there were no patients in the pharmacy, he would be busy until the afternoon and return with the moon lotus hoe. In the deep twilight, he walked on the long and narrow winding mountain path. The branches and leaves of the plants on both sides of the path slanted out. The evening dew moistened the bottom of his pants and shoes. Time was like the clearest flowing water. Unknowingly, it flowed through the gaps of one's fingers. Gradually, half of the mortal citizens in Wuzhou City knew that there was a Mr. Jiang in the Mud Bottle Alley. He was extremely effective in treating patients and fetching herbs. However, his fees were extremely low. When he was in a good mood, he would even do it for free. On this day, Jiang Tian just walked into the store and put down the medicine basket. His heart jumped. He saw a familiar figure. Mr. Lovesickness. Is it possible to cure it? Huang Linger stood up and walked over with light steps. For over a year, she had been suffering. Her complexion was haggard and looked as though she had lost her soul. In fact, after the previous encounter by the riverside, she waited for a few days. After waiting for a few days, she found a suitable reason to make a trip to the Eastern Empire. She finally verified that Jiang Tian was the state marshal Xiqing. That battle that killed the saint, Suzhou, was indeed to cover up the traces of Yang Dingtian's death. However, Jiang Tian had already hung the seal blade, and was nowhere to be found. Huang Linger had been silently searching for Jiang Tian's traces. She had even passed through a few countries. Unexpectedly, Jiang Tian was in Wuxia city under her sect and hadn't gone far. Fairy is a cultivator and is like a deity. I am unable to cure your illness. Jiang Tian acted as though he didn't know her, and smiled indifferently. Mister, how would you know if you don't try? Help me take my pulse. Huang Linger extended her snow-white wrist. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears. At this moment, she had a realization in her heart. The furthest distance in the world wasn't the galaxy of light years that couldn't be traversed and couldn't get close to each other. Instead, she had to act as though she didn't know him even though he was standing in front of her. At this moment, she hated the existence behind the scenes that she didn't know who he was. All right, I shall give it a try. Jiang Tian hesitated for a moment. Finally, he smiled bitterly, shook his head, and pressed his finger. Could it be that this is the feeling of ascending in broad daylight? Otherwise, why would someone bitterly pursue to become an immortal? Young lady is a cultivator and pursues the Tao of deity. Jiang Tian felt the subtle touch of her delicate and warm skin on his fingers, and his heart felt sour and touched. After a long time, he moved his hand away and said earnestly, "You're right. I might only be immortal, but I have heard that those who have truly reached the peak of cultivation aren't as simple as immortality. Furthermore, they can turn back time and occupy all the possibilities of the past and future. It is as though there are billions of different lives. What is a mere temporary yearning?" Chapter 2019. Sir, I've learned my lesson. When Huang Linger heard this, she forced herself to calm down. She also knew that her feelings for Jiang Tian were too infatuated. If she got too close to Jiang Tian, it was very likely that Jiang Tian's identity would be exposed, and he would be replaced by the powerful expert behind the scenes. From this point of view, it could even be said that she wasn't a qualified cultivator. One had to know that most cultivators were extremely rational. Don't worry, it won't take too long, Jiang Tian said with a smile. Of course, Jiang Tian also understood that Huang Linger also had to get rid of the shackles and jump out of the chessboard. Otherwise, she would also become his hindrance. After he broke through to the divine transformation realm, he was bound to leave Saint Origin World and continue to the core area where the 9 major immortal sects were located. Looking for new opportunities to break through, he had to take Huang Linger with him. After all, he didn't feel at ease leaving her here alone. The real problem with taking Huang Linger away was that she had never changed her identity. It was easy for her to be used as a clue and be targeted by the immortal monarch. Jiang Tian had also thought of a way to deal with this. That was Huang Linger faked her death to escape, and then cultivated the deceiving heaven and earth mysterious technique to conceal her aura. She could transform into a fish and dragon without a trace and live with another identity. Thank you for your advice. Huang Linger restrained her emotions, calmed down, and got up to leave. It was a dark night with no moon. The stars were even brighter. In the past year, Jiang Tian could clearly feel that his mentality was slowly getting rid of the life of a cultivator and becoming the same as that of a mortal. For example, nowadays he rarely meditated. This was something that was impossible in the past. Whether it was in his previous life or now, he had been diligently cultivating, using all the time he had to improve his cultivation. His life was full of intrigue, and the weak were prey to the strong. The slightest carelessness could lead to death. He had almost never laid down to sleep like this. Even late at night, he only spent it in meditation. This kind of life, although exciting and passionate, had a trace of regret and a trace of peace. It was incomplete and twisted. And now, it seemed like the path of transcendent mortal had given Jiang Tian a reason to rest. There were no fights in his life. Although his life was ordinary, it was like a trickling stream that cleansed his soul. At first, Jiang Tian was extremely unfamiliar with this feeling. But as time slowly passed, his mentality gradually accepted the current situation, and he began to live the life of a mortal. Jiang Tian sipped his fruit wine as he lay on a bamboo chair in the courtyard, looking up at the starry sky. The world was unhurried and boundless. The universe was deep and profound. He couldn't sense a single human figure or any traces of civilization. They were so magnificent. Compared to this, he himself was so insignificant. However, it was precisely this kind of insignificant cultivator that, upon reaching the return to void stage, would possess an inner world of its own. With a wave of his hand, he could destroy everything in his line of sight. Even continents, stars could be nurtured. This contradictory comparison was one of the problems that Jiang Tian had faced previously. It was also a dilemma that he had to solve in order to become a transcendent mortal. The mentality of an ordinary person and the strength of a transcendent would naturally produce all kinds of feelings of confusion and hesitation. However, the mentality of a transcendent wouldn't allow one to abandon one's personality and way of doing things and become a stone without any fluctuations in one's emotions. One could only use the past as a foundation to reconstruct one's outlook on life and values and integrate it with one's soul. Only then would one be able to walk further and better, and not be disturbed by the inner demons. For example, as one's lifespan increased, compared to mortals who hadn't lived past 100 years, one would feel a sense of dissonance between the short and long periods of time, as though they weren't the same kind of life form. Currently, Zhang Xian's cultivation was advancing by leaps and bounds. After reincarnating, he wasn't even 100 years old yet, so this feeling wasn't too obvious. But thinking back to his previous life, after reaching the age of 500, many foundation establishment cultivators he knew had either died or passed away. In fact, in his previous life after he ascended to the firmament, he passed by the solar system, and the entire solar system was destroyed by the eye. At that time, how should he adjust to the changes in his feelings? In his previous life, Jiang Tian hadn't been able to figure out this problem for a very long time. Viewing the short period of brilliance and the long period of time correctly was the most important thing in cultivating one's soul. Putting aside ascending to the immortal realm, there were many cultivators who only reached nascent soul or divinity transformation. They would view themselves as the high and mighty deities and treat mortals as ants. There were also some who didn't interact with them at all. Life forms of different levels didn't share a common language. There was no right or wrong in this, but Jiang Tian didn't like it. What he admired the most was the attitude of a senior. Sentimental but not tired. He didn't think highly of himself and looked down on mortals indifferently. He also didn't cry because of the end of his friends' lifespans. He enjoyed it but didn't indulge in it. In this aspect, the death of one's wife was the epitome of this attitude. At the same time, it could be said that he had seen through the mysteries of life and death. As his thoughts drifted, Jiang Tian's mind seemed to be lively and calm. There was an indescribable sense of beauty in it. He felt that his soul was expanding endlessly. Every single blade of grass and tree, every single branch and leaf was filled with sentiments. He had reached a state where one could see the vastness of the universe and feel pity for the greenery. If not for the shackles of his physical body, he would be able to create unique objects with just his imagination alone. The feeling of transcendent mortal is truly mysterious. The transcendent mortal in my previous life wasn't even a tenth of what I am doing now. With a calm mind, Jiang Tian actually felt a trace of fatigue. In fact, this kind of fatigue was something he had never felt before. When he closed his eyes, a thought appeared in his mind. However, transcendent mortal isn't enough. From tomorrow onwards, I will seal my cultivation completely and walk the path of transcendent mortal to its limits. When he woke up the next day, Jiang Tian took a deep breath and suppressed his cultivation completely. In an instant, the cries of customers haggling and chatting in the streets and alleyways drilled into his ears. It was hard to distinguish one from the other, but it had lost the sense of clarity it had in the past. With his ear aperture closed, it was difficult for him to distinguish between so many sounds. All he could feel was a chaotic mess and his head was spinning. In fact, the feeling of heaviness was extremely strong. It was as though he was carrying 1,000-gene burden on his shoulders, making it difficult for him to even move his hands. Even though he hadn't truly lost his cultivation completely, and was only suppressing it, he still felt a little frustrated and flustered. This is the true feeling of a mortal. The feeling of lightness is gone, and the gravity of reality is truly frightening. The heck, Kong Teichu, what's wrong with you? You are a person who has lived 2 lives and cultivated for 10,000 years. Why have you lost even this sense of normalcy? Jiang Tian couldn't help but berate himself. Could it be that the perfect state of mind that he had tempered through countless trials and tribulations was really so illusory, built entirely on his fearsome strength? Where was the comprehension of life and death? Where was the generosity to face difficulties? Where was the patience to remain calm and composed? As such thoughts surfaced in his mind, Jiang Tian gradually regained his composure. He was no longer at a loss. Chapter 2020. The sky was clear and the air was clear. Jiang Tian carried the medicine basket and was about to go to the mountain to pick herbs. However, before leaving, Jiang Tian called Iron Bull to go with him. Thank you for thinking so highly of me, Mr. Jiang. This is the first time you've asked me to go with you. Iron Bull said happily. Haha, it's not so boring to have a companion. Jiang Tian's face twitched. That's because I sealed my own cultivation. I can't deal with those gray wolves on the hero's slope right now. Sure enough, after sealing one's cultivation and completely turning into a mortal, one's mentality would be different. On the contrary, one's connection with the mortal world would be closer. The two of them went together to a breakfast shop to eat breakfast. Suddenly, they heard a sigh in their ears. The court bulletin says that the Eastern Empire has completed the transition from a marquis system to a county system. The hidden dragon trials are open to all ambitious people. Regardless of whether they are commoners or descendants of marquises, they all have to participate in the trials. Only by obtaining a ranking can they be rewarded. Jiang Tian turned his head to look. This was a man around 30 years old. He remembered that he was the accountant of a subsidiary company of the Luoying sect. His appearance was ordinary and he had no cultivation, but he was full of energy. He was holding a court bulletin and reading it. This court bulletin was like the newspapers on Earth, but it was aimed at mortals without cultivation. Cultivators usually use communication magic tools to send messages, and it would arrive in an instant. The news on the court bulletin was also leaked from cultivators' mouths. The authenticity was very high, but it was slightly delayed. However, it also had its advantages. It didn't require magic tools, and was printed on ordinary paper, so the price was low. The hidden dragon trials have been changed to once a year. This time, it has attracted a large number of cultivators into the Eastern Empire. Jiang Tian smiled faintly and said, Actually, in my opinion, the Eastern Empire has already become a large sect. However, the sect's mission is for cultivators to fight for the common people. He didn't stop eating breakfast and casually interjected like ordinary neighbors chatting. Although he was located in the far east of the continent and was very far from the Eastern Empire, he could still easily inquire about relevant information. The Eastern Empire had already completely abolished the marquis system and changed to a county system. They also set a national policy of cultivators fighting for mortals. The hidden dragon trials were open and open. Regardless of background, anyone could participate. As such, the Eastern Empire was able to recruit a large number of talents. In the beginning, only nascent soul cultivators joined, but in the end even soul formation cultivators joined. Furthermore, the test of the hidden dragon trials was aimed at the pantheon of demons. Surprisingly, the hidden dragon trials had achieved quite a lot, crushing the pantheon of demons. Judging from the current situation, it was only a matter of time before the pantheon of demons was destroyed. Mr. Jiang is right. Right now, the Eastern Empire is implementing the two national policies of fairness and independence left behind by Imperial Advisor Siqing. A single spark can start a prairie fire. It is known as the Spark Revolution. The accountant was also extremely respectful to Jiang Tian. He cupped his hands, nodded vigorously, and said with an excited smile, "They established the Starfire Academy, and anyone can apply for it. As long as they have the aptitude, are willing to work hard, and pass the examination, they can enroll for free. However, they must sign a sole contract and serve the Eastern Empire in the future, when they participate in the Hidden Dragon trials. Although it is a condition, serving the Empire and participating in the Hidden Dragon trials to become an official is not a bad thing in the first place. Many commoners want this opportunity but don't have it. The most important thing is this free cultivation academy. It is really too good. The Luoying sect is so rich. Apart from those with exceptional talent, even if you have the cultivation of nascent soul stage, you still have to pay a tribute to enter the sect." As soon as his words fell, many diners around him immediately echoed his words. You all know Qi Laosan from Stone Alley, right? He was originally a refugee with a poor family. However, when he participated in the Starfire Academy's examination, he was actually tested to have a 9th grade spirit root. He has only been in the academy for a year, but he has already cultivated to the foundation building stage. I heard that many countries have begun to learn from the Hidden Dragon Trials reforms. For example, the Black Moon Empire. Now many sects have also begun to reduce their tributes so that they can recruit disciples. This Imperial Advisor Siqing is truly a genius. I heard that he explained in the Spark Revolution that people are the most important factor in cultivation. Just listen to it, it is simply enlightening. From the looks of it, in 10 years or even a few decades, everyone in our Saint Origin continent may be able to cultivate. Everyone was talking at once, vying to express their own opinions. The great changes in the past few days were mostly caused by Imperial Advisor Siqing's reforms in the Eastern Empire. Jiang Tian was secretly pleased with himself. When he paid the bill and left, his footsteps became lighter. Who knew that he would slip and fall, but was supported by the bookkeeper beside him. This shop is very dirty. The water used to wash the pot is poured on the road. It is very wet and slippery. Sir, you must be careful. The bookkeeper smiled as he gave the order. The corner of Jiang Tian's mouth twitched. He wanted to laugh but couldn't. His heart was full of sighs. He had already noticed the slipperiness of the ground, but after so many years, when had he ever paid attention to such a small matter? Not to mention this level of slipperiness. Even if it was a 10,000 miles wide lake, he could still fly through the air with his eyes closed and fight with his body agilely. Unfortunately, it was not the same as before. Other than knowledge, he had no skills at all. He had to be more vigilant about small matters that he didn't care about in the past. Therefore, not only could he not rely on his cultivation, but he also couldn't completely rely on his past experience. Because Jiang Tian had sealed his cultivation, he was actually so tired that he was panting and sweating profusely. His legs were even trembling a little. This kind of exhaustion was something that Jiang Tian had not experienced for many years. However, it made Jiang Tian feel a kind of peace and carefree as a human. At night, after washing off the dust on his body, Jiang Tian slept very soundly. In the room of an inn in the city, a black-robed man who had been closing his eyes suddenly opened his eyes. The darkness in his eyes was suffused with a bright silver color. It was somewhat sacred and indifferent. Like the clearest mirror, it reflected everything in his surroundings, including illusions that were difficult to see with the naked eye. For example, the strength of his qi and blood, the mist-like yin qi, and the ghosts embedded in the wall with only their faces exposed. Wu Wang has finally reached the small success stage. The black-robed man said to himself happily and slowly got up. He was a strong heterodox cultivator. In order to cultivate this magical power, he had suppressed all kinds of desires for several years. Now that he had achieved perfection, he had to vent and celebrate. According to his observation, no one in this small city of Wuzhou could block his attack. Pushing open the window, the black-robed man jumped into the middle of the street, as light as a leopard cat. Looking at the slightly flickering lights on both sides and the quiet street, he recalled all the things he knew before. He slowly walked forward, full of satisfaction, as if he was the master of all life in this small city. After all, the Luoying sect is above. There are cultivators patrolling from time to time, so I still have to be careful. He thought about the details, thought about it, passed by the hunter Tainyo's family and walked forward. He had also been in Wuzhou City for a few days. Although Mr. Jiang, who opened the medicine shop, seemed to have no cultivation, he always had some inexplicable feelings when he sensed it. For the sake of seriousness, he started with him. Stopping at the door of the medicine shop, he slowly opened the door. Silently, his eyes swept to the bed, full of bloodthirst and cruelty. He saw the figure of Jiang Tian sleeping on the bed. He raised his right palm and was about to make a move. Chapter 2021. But at this moment, his eyes of innocence reflected an image that was different from what the naked eye could see. The sleeping figure was surrounded by a purple-gold true dragon, coiling in circles, layer after layer, overlapping each other. It was at least 1,000 feet long. Its scales were like precious gold, shining with a frightening metallic luster. Its horns were lofty, and golden lotuses were growing on the ground. It was asleep with its eyes closed, but when it breathed, it spurted out thunder and lightning. All kinds of images were vivid and shocking. The black-robed man was sweating and instinctively stepped back. He hit the door with a thud and said in panic, "The protection of the 9th true dragon?" This seemingly ordinary, kind-hearted man who mingled well with his neighbors actually had a real dragon as his pet. Where did he come from? Is he an immortal from the 9th heaven or a Buddha? The sound of the door knocking woke Jiang Tian up. Years of habit made him quickly turn over and sit up, putting on the most suitable posture for action. He narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the black-robed man in front of him, while the sound of the protection of the 9th true dragon echoed in his ears. Dahei's strength was extraordinary and its bloodline was amazing, but after all, it had played the role of a big black dog for so many years. Like other pets, it was used to snuggling up to its master. At night, when Jiang Tian was asleep, it ran to the bed at Jiang Tian's feet. However, it was in a deep sleep. It dispersed the restraint of the shape-shifting skill and turned into the true dragon. In a short time, he had outlined the general process of the matter. Facing the panic-stricken black-robed man, Jiang Tian smiled and said, "How can you enter without asking for permission?" The scene in front of him was in a trance. The real dragon was no longer there, but a big black dog. However, the black-robed man was still frightened and instinctively shook his head. You have no cultivation at all. How can you be protected by the 9th true dragon?" He felt that he had to know the reason before he died. Jiang Tian sat down and said with a smile, "You might not believe it, but I used to be an expert of my generation. Because I was facing a bottleneck and couldn't break through. After thinking about it, I finally understood that cutting off my greatest reliance, which was my strength, was the shortcut to see my true self. As for the protection of the 9 heavens true dragon, it was because it was a pet I took in when I was still a cultivator. I want to experience the feeling of a mortal without cultivation. Even if it kills me, don't come out to help." He waved his hand, and Dahei left and returned to his room. Bluff. Deliberately mystifying things. The black-robed man was stunned, and then he laughed uncontrollably, which woke several people. After a long time, he gasped and said, "You must have scared me with illusion. There's no 9th heaven purple gold true dragon. It's just a black dog. Do you think I am stupid? How can I be an idiot? Haha, this joke. I am such an idiot," Jiang He thought. "Only by destroying my own martial arts can I see my true self. Haha, self-destruction is the only way to die." The black-robed man continued to laugh. "All cultivators understand that the most real reliance in the world is the strength that is cultivated bit by bit. How can you give it up to see your true self?" Jiang Tian thought for a while and said, "Haotian Taoism once divided the tribulations into many categories. There are different kinds of thunder tribulations, tribulations of Yin wind and earth fire, tribulations of man involving karma, tribulations of 3 lives related to the past and future, and void tribulations when you suddenly lose all your divine sense and dharma power. At that time, can you still rely on your cultivation? Once you encounter the void tribulations, will you just wait for death and not for yourself? That's different. If it's a tribulation, you can prepare treasures to block it, invite friends to protect you, and make a perfect plan. As long as you get through that period, you will naturally recover. It's not the same as destroying your own cultivation to find the illusory true self. The black-robed man shook his head and sneered. He still felt that this master, who was protected by gods and Buddhas, was joking with him. There must be a master with great divine sense who could make him unaware of his martial arts. But how could there be a master who would do such a stupid thing as destroying his own cultivation? Jiang Tian said seriously. What if the void tribulations last for 1 year, 5 years, or even 10 years? How can there be such a long tribulation? The black-robed man didn't believe it at all. Jiang Tian didn't argue and said with a smile, "Aren't I the same as what you said? I can get the protection of the 9th heaven purple gold true dragon, have treasures that can automatically protect me, and if I want to do something, there are not many people in the world who are willing to help me and not abandon me because of the loss of my strength. I just need to know myself again, know the world, and adjust the habits that came from cultivation. What's the difference between this and the void tribulations? But others can recover once the tribulation is over. Destroying one's own cultivation is a slim hope. It's more like giving up on oneself." The black-robed man still couldn't accept this choice. For a martial arts cultivator, strength is life, strength is everything. Jiang Tian didn't answer directly. Instead, he looked out of the window and pointed to the floating mountains of the Luoying sect and said, "When I had cultivation, I could walk in the sky and go to the Luoying sect that is tens of thousands of miles away was just a matter of time. Now if I want to go there, I can either ask for help or find a refining sect, and use their ingenious magical artifacts to travel." Then he pointed to the dark mountain peak again. "Look at the steep mountain peak over there. When I had cultivation, it was just a step. Now if I want to climb up, I have to be prepared and cross mountains and rivers to get there. In the past, when I wanted to do something, I could do it myself. Even if I was far away, I could do it from a distance. Now I have to take a detour and waste people's time. Many of my past experiences, habits, and cognition collapsed in front of my eyes with the loss of my cultivation. I have to reconstruct them to match the current situation. So, I have to understand what the pattern is and what the outside is. I have to rely on them but not rely on them. I have to be limited by them and cover my eyes." His voice was low and his tone was normal. He described all kinds of changes that seemed to be natural. The black-robed man was in disbelief at first, but gradually he fell into deep thought. It seemed that there was some truth in what he said. He responded from time to time. Jiang Tian continued to talk. Unknowingly, the east was slightly bright and the sky was burning. The black-robed man suddenly frowned and said, "You said so much. Are you trying to persuade me to seal my cultivation and become immortal like you?" "No, I'm just comforting myself." Jiang Tian laughed self-deprecatingly and waved his hand. The eyes of innocence is a Taoist supernatural power. It focuses on the unity of the body and mind and not being blinded by desire. Even if you master it, if you let it go, you will regress. Take care of yourself. "You're right, sir." The black-robed man did not dare to disobey, and retreated out of the cabin. All kinds of desires in his heart had long disappeared after listening to the lecture in the fog. There were many people who woke up early in the morning. They were talking and laughing. The morning fog was thin and the sun was shining brightly. The black-robed man seemed to wake up with a start and said to himself in shock, "What did I do? Where am I? Did I just listen to that lunatic talk nonsense for the entire night? And I feel that what he said makes sense. Didn't I want to rob and rob? How could I forget?" Chapter 2022. After waving his hand to let the black-robed man leave, Jiang Tian turned his gaze to the window. He looked at the rising sun and the dazzling morning glow, seeming to be enlightened. After a few breaths, he turned his head back and looked at the empty door. He listened to the bustling morning. When he sensed that everything was peaceful, he exhaled quietly, as if he had gone through a fierce battle. It's really not easy, he sighed to himself. If Jiang Tian wanted to experience the feelings of a mortal, he would really seal his cultivation and not let Dahe help him. He had to use his ability to deceive. Combined with his past experience and some insights he gained from sealing his cultivation, he dragged the black-robed man out for a night and eliminated all kinds of desires in his heart. At the same time, he used the requirements of the Eyes of Innocence to bind the black-robed man with half-truth and half-bluff. In this half of the night he seemed to be an otherworldly expert, talking about what was external and what was true self. He was carefree and deep, but in fact, he was mentally exhausted and worried about every step. He was afraid that the black-robed man would not be attracted by what he said, but he was also worried that he would go too far and cause a backlash. There were no fists, kicks, or swords. This night's chat did not seem like a fierce battle, but it was true, although the black-robed man might not feel it. Fortunately, I still have a mouth. Jiang Tian touched his temples, feeling a little self-deprecating and self-satisfied. In his previous life, when he was in the university dormitory, he was addicted to martial arts and fantasy novels. He was the best at livening up the atmosphere, gossiping, and fooling around among his roommates. He led a group of them astray, and they joked that he only had a mouth left. They told him quite sincerely that in ancient times, Confucius became a sage, and was known as Confucius. Today there was the king of talking, so he should be known as Mouth. Sure enough, without martial arts, he had to change his attitude, way of thinking and way of dealing with things. After this night, Jiang Tian had a deeper understanding of the path of becoming immortal. It was not his cultivation that blinded his eyes, but his experience, habits, inherent cognition, and instinctive judgment formed after relying on his cultivation that interfered with his mind. Under certain circumstances, they were very correct, but if one completely believed in them and followed them, they would inevitably be conservative and stubborn. Sooner or later, they would reach the threshold without knowing it, and from then on, they would be stuck. It was precisely because of this that a true transcendent mortal, severing one's self to see one's true self, didn't mean giving up on one's cultivation and strength. Instead, it was to see through the limitations and see through the limitations of the Dharma. Once he broke through and saw his true self, he would be able to completely control his cultivation and strength. He would be able to control it and not be restrained by it. It was like building a boat to cross the sea, but when you reached the other side, you didn't let go of the boat. That was putting the cart before the horse, confusing the means and the purpose. This kind of thing was not something that could be easily seen through. The experience, cognition, and habits that were almost ingrained into one's instincts would always play a role unknowingly, moistening things silently. It was very difficult for one to notice the difference. Even if he had a corresponding thought in his mind, he wouldn't be able to recognize it. After all, those closely involved cannot see the game clearly. It would take a long time to examine it bit by bit before it could be seen through. It was enough to be called a big problem on the path of cultivation. This was a true transcension of mortals, and it wasn't a superfluous move. Instead, it was a rewarding one. By giving up the strength of cultivation, the contradiction between the experience, cognition, habits, and reality directly surfaced. Although it was intense, it was indeed quite obvious. It made the heart that had been stubborn after many years of cultivation become lively and quick-witted, allowing him to experience completely different experiences from time to time. Time passed quickly, like flowing water. Day and night flew by quickly. In the blink of an eye, another 4 years had passed. This was already Jiang Tian's 7th year in the capital. Tainyo's son, Ahu, grew taller and taller. His body became stronger and stronger. He turned from a teenager into a young man. Jiang Beibei also grew up a lot. She was already a budding young girl with a slim figure. It was obvious that she was a beauty in the making. There were a few fewer and a few more neighbors around them. The boss of the Kong family's textiles shop passed away because of a serious illness. The shop was sold to someone else. Old Zhao quit the Zhao family's blacksmith shop and passed it on to his eldest son. Slight wrinkles gradually appeared on the faces of Ahu's parents. Although they were still young, They couldn't stand the washing of time. It was worth mentioning that in the past 2 years, many of the neighbors had come up to Jiang Tian to propose marriage. Although Jiang Tian had a daughter who wasn't young, she looked quite young. Moreover, her medical skills were extraordinary and her medicine was miraculous. In the eyes of mortals, she knew many cultivators. That was already very impressive. Every time, they were tactfully rejected by Jiang Tian. Spring went and autumn came, and the sun and moon alternated. In the past few years, Jiang Tian saw birth, old age, illness and death. He felt rather emotional in his heart. He had already recovered the 3 ultimate flowers, but in the past 2 years, he had only meditated and breathed out twice. He didn't even care about his own cultivation. It had been a long time since he used his inner vision to check. In the past 2 years, Jiang Tian's medicine shop gradually became famous in the entire Wuxia city. Although there weren't many customers, it was still much better than not opening for a year. However, now in Jiang Tian's medicine shop, most of the people who came were not mortals, but cultivators. Basically, 6 out of 10 people would be martial cultivators. They found that the herbs that Jiang Tian mixed, even if the spiritual qi wasn't that rich, could still heal many cultivators' injuries. It was even very beneficial for cultivation. The matter of Wuxia City having an extraordinary person gradually became famous in the cultivation world here. Jiang Tian's mentality was always calm and there was no change. What he sought was the mentality of a mortal, to experience a mortal's life and feel the reincarnation of the heavenly Tao. The medicine shop was only a tool for him to comprehend the heavenly Tao. It was the same for seeing patients and getting herbs. At this time, seeing that the new year was coming, Wuxia City was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. New peaches were replaced with old talismans. Jiang Tian walked out of the shop and sat at the door of the shop, looking at the pedestrians outside. In his eyes, there was a deep reminiscence. This was the 7th new year he had spent in Wuxia City. Every time, the feeling was different. However, there was only one thing, and that was the nostalgia for his childhood. In those years, in the Milky Way galaxy that was light years away from the Milky Way, on that vast blue planet, the Lunar New Year there was really full of New Year's atmosphere. In the hunting shop diagonally opposite the shop, Ahu quickly ran out, holding some fireworks in his hand. He brought a few children to play excitedly. Seeing Ahu, Jiang Tian's eyes revealed a trace of joy and relief. He had watched this child grow up in the past few years, from an 11-year-old child to an 18-year-old young man. Last year, Ahu could not stand his father's nagging and gave up his dream of hunting. He began to learn how to forge iron tools from a blacksmith on the street. This way he would be more peaceful. However, once he had free time he would still run to Jiang Tian's place to watch him treat people and get medicine. Although Ahu did not come often, a pot of fruit wine every day had never been stopped. While setting off fireworks, Ahu shouted and ran to Jiang Tian's side. He sat down on the cold wooden stool next to him and did not feel cold. Instead, he winked and said, "Uncle Jiang, a few days ago, I heard from my father that shopkeeper Liu in the east wanted to betroth his daughter to you. Why didn't you agree? I secretly saw his daughter. She was very beautiful." Jiang Tian smiled slightly, touched the youth's head, and said, "Uncle has a wife. Otherwise, how could I have your sister Bebe?" "Ah, really? She's still alive. I thought she had already passed away." Ahu stood up with a swoosh, his face full of surprise. "She's waiting for me in a place far away. One day, I'll go find her." Jiang Tian's eyes revealed a trace of tenderness, and a figure of Zhao Xueqing's back appeared in his mind. "I know. You must have had a child before marriage and were not accepted by your aunt's family. You came to Wuxia City to do business, and prepare to make a lot of money so that you can go back and marry her." Ahu laughed and imagined a lot of plots that he had heard from plays. Chapter 2023. Jiang Tian couldn't help laughing. He nodded and said, "Yes, when I make a lot of money, I'll go back and marry a wife." But he was thinking that his wedding with his previous life, and this life was hasty. If they reunited one day, would he give her a grand wedding? It didn't need to be too grand. He just wanted to blow up a few stars as fireworks and shock the whole universe. Where are Bebe and Dahe? Why didn't they spend the new year with you? Ahu asked. They have something to do. Jiang Tian smiled bitterly. Jiang Bebe had begun her first closed-door training to break through to the foundation realm. However, this closed-door training place was not at home. Jiang Tian didn't accompany her, but let Dahe guard her. Therefore, he was alone at home at this time. In that case, uncle, let's go to my house for New Year's Eve dinner. Ahu was about to speak. At this time, his father, Iron Bull, called from his new blacksmith shop diagonally across the street. Ahu quickly responded and said to Jiang Tian with a bitter face, Uncle, I'm sorry. Uncle Jiang, I have to forge again. As he spoke, he helplessly returned to the ironware shop. From the shop, Ahu's father's reproach came out. Jiang Tian took a sip of wine and sat at the door, listening quietly. At this time, some snowflakes gradually fell from the sky. Gradually, the snowflakes became bigger and bigger. The first snow of this year fell silently from the sky. The temperature suddenly dropped. The snowflakes hit Jiang Tian's face and quickly melted into ice water. Jiang Tian looked up at the dusky sky. After a long time, he stretched out his right hand and casually clenched it. Suddenly, the surrounding snowflakes instantly gathered. Jiang Tian took a deep breath and released his right hand. The snowflakes immediately collapsed and drifted around again. This scene happened so fast that no pedestrians noticed anything unusual. They just lowered their heads and hurried on. As the sky darkened and the lights came on, there were fewer pedestrians on the street. In the end, there was no one on the whole street. Even the surrounding shops were closed early due to the heavy snowfall and the New Year's Day. They no longer did business. The family gathered around the stove to warm themselves, eat New Year's Eve dinner, drink wine and talk cheerfully. This warmth was not only physical, but also spiritual. The warmth of a family reunion could drive away any coldness. Jiang Tian's eyes gradually revealed a hint of loneliness. The coldness brought about by the snowflakes was insignificant to him. However, at this moment, he looked at the surrounding shops that lit up one by one. On the entire street, only his shop was pitch black. Suddenly, a trace of coldness rose in his heart. This kind of coldness was not something that could be dispelled by any fire source, nor was it something that could be made up for by any divine ability or spell. This kind of coldness was the price to pay for comprehending the heavenly Tao. It was a necessity to experience life. If he wanted to become a divinity, he had to become a mortal first. However, even though it sounded easy, how could it possibly be that simple? Right now, Jiang Tian was experiencing the feeling of loneliness. His parents were billions of light years behind him in the Milky Way, on that small blue planet. Qing'er was in the distant core area of the central galaxy. She was thousands of miles away, and it was difficult to see her. It was as if he was floating alone in the Saint Origin world. He could not see his old friends in front of him, nor could he see anyone behind him. Thinking about the endless world, he cried alone. He knew that this kind of loneliness would continue to haunt him until the day he jumped out of the chessboard of fate. Jiang Tian was silent for a long time before he staggered to his feet. At this moment, he seemed to have aged a little. He slowly tidied up the chairs at the door, returned to the shop, and gently closed the door. I can't let go. I can't let go. Jiang Tian looked at the cold pot and stove. In his mind, the scene of his family gathering and the lively scene of the disciples surrounding him appeared. He could not help but mumble to himself, his eyes lost focus. When he was cultivating in his previous life, he could not let go of his family. Now that he was reborn, he still could not let go. However, this kind of feeling was different from back then. If he wanted to reach the soul formation stage, he had to first become immortal. If he really let go of his family and everything, it would be impossible for him to become immortal. But why should I let go? The corner of Jiang Tian's mouth curved into a smile of enlightenment. Every soul formation cultivator was powerful not only because of their cultivation, but also because of the deeply hidden feelings in their hearts. Feelings but not tiring. They did not cut off their 7 emotions and 6 desires, but they also did not cry because of a short separation or the death of a loved one. They enjoyed their feelings but did not indulge in them. It was this kind of emotion that allowed them to become immortal. Using this emotion, they could break through the nascent soul stage and reach the soul formation stage. It was because of this obsession that Jiang Tian did not encounter too many setbacks in becoming immortal. Instead, he gradually felt the feeling of being immortal. At this moment, he was immersed in the longing for Qing'er Ling his parents and his homeland. He quietly felt this feeling. The magic power in his body began to rotate crazily again. This rotation gradually spread out of his body. Above all the herbs in the shop, a trace of spiritual energy suddenly rose. It fluctuated in the same way as the magic power in Jiang Tian's body, rapidly rotating. Gradually, this kind of spiritual energy rotated faster and faster, and spread out of the shop. When the falling snowflakes fell from the sky and landed on the roof of the shop, they also rotated, forming spinning snowflakes that quickly slid in all directions. The snow became heavier and heavier. It was silent. After a long time, Jiang Tian gradually came to his senses. He stood up and opened the door of the shop. A gust of cold wind blew in his face, mixed with countless cold snowflakes. Jiang Tian looked up at the sky and said calmly, "The soul formation stage, I'm determined to get. No one can use me as a chess piece." The snowflakes falling from the sky became heavier. A thick layer of snow accumulated on the ground. At this moment, the door of the ironworks shop opposite suddenly opened. Ahu and his father were about to go out when they saw Jiang Tian standing opposite them. They could not help but be stunned. Then, Ahu ran a few steps and stepped on the snow, making crunching sounds. He came to Jiang Tian's side and shouted, "Uncle Jiang, did you know that we were coming?" As he spoke, he entered the room and sat by the fire. Ahu's father, Tai Niu, held a wooden basket with a silly smile and said to Jiang Tian, "Brother Jiang, are you busy?" Jiang Tian smiled and said, "No, come in and talk." The father and son entered the room and opened the lid of the wooden basket. There were 4 home-cooked dishes and 2 pots of fruit wine in it. Jiang Tian glanced at it and looked at Ahu's father with a faint smile. In the past few years, he had often been in contact with him. This was the first time that he had seen this straightforward man act like this. Obviously, he had something to do with him. "Brother Tainyo, if you have something to say, just say it," Jiang Tian said. Ahu's father hesitated, rubbed his hands and said awkwardly, "It's okay. It's okay." Ahu looked at the dishes in the wooden basket. He swallowed his saliva and reached inside. His father glared at him, and Ahu was so scared that he quickly withdrew his hand and muttered discontentedly, "I just want to borrow some crystal stones. What's there to be embarrassed about?" Ahu's father suddenly blushed and scolded, "Little bastard, I'll teach you a lesson when we get home." Ahu stuck out his tongue and said to Jiang Tian, "Uncle Jiang, my father is embarrassed. Let me tell you. My mother asked the matchmaker to arrange a marriage for me, but they asked for a lot of betrothal gifts. We don't have enough money at home." Ahu's father sighed, looked at Jiang Tian and said helplessly, "Good brother, I'm really sorry to trouble you, but Ahu has no talent for cultivation. Mortals at his age are all married. The longer we wait, the harder it is to find a wife." Jiang Tian nodded with a smile, picked up the wine pot in the wooden basket, took a sip and said, "How much do they want?" Ahu's father hesitated and said, "In fact, they don't want much. Besides, I still have some debts outside that haven't been paid back. They want 30 low-grade crystal stones." Ahu curled his lips and whispered, "Mother clearly said that they need 80. You can't get back those bad debts." Before he finished speaking, he was glared at by his father again. Jiang Tian didn't say anything. He nodded and got up to go to the back room, where there was a large frame full of crystal stones and spirit stones. Jiang Tian casually picked up a piece of top-grade crystal stone, returned to the shop, and put it in front of Ahu's father. When Ahu's father saw the top-grade crystal stone, he was stunned and hurriedly said, "I don't need so much. Brother, take it back. I only need to borrow 30 low-grade crystal stones." In his opinion, the top-grade crystal stone was quite big. It was much more than what he needed. Jiang Tian picked up the wine pot and said with a smile, "Brother, this money is not for you. It's for me to buy wine. From now on, I'll buy a pot of wine every day." Your fruit wine is good. It's worth 10 years' worth of wine money. Ahu's father was stunned for a moment. Then he showed a grateful look and said, Brother, this. Ahu rolled his eyes and said, Dad, just take it. Uncle Jiang is different from you. He's a craftsman. Any herbal medicine is worth more than 10 low-grade crystal stones. Ahu's father glared at him again. Then he took a deep breath, picked up the wine pot, poured himself a large cup, took a big gulp, and nodded. Brother Jiang, you don't need to worry about 10 years or 8 years. As long as you live here for one day, my family will send you a pot every day. Jiang Tian chuckled. Looking at the father and son in front of him, his heart gradually felt warm and was no longer cold. That night, Ahu's father drank a lot. 2 pots of wine were obviously not enough. Ahu served him on the side. He didn't drink enough until he brought the 10th pot. In the end, Ahu's father was drunk and passed out. But he had been holding the top-grade crystal tightly in his hand. He was helped back by Jiang Tian and Ahu. When Jiang Tian went back, Ahu whispered to Jiang Tian, Uncle Jiang, my family has a lot of this wine. My father doesn't allow me to tell others. In fact, there are several large pots in the cellar of my family, which were left by our ancestors. I heard that there are still many pots buried underground. But my father said that you like them, so he kept them for you. If my father didn't insist on selling them, my mother wouldn't let him borrow money. She could sell them at the winery for a lot of money. Chapter 2024. The night was dark, and the sound of firecrackers could be heard from afar. Braving the wind and snow, Jiang Tian returned to the medicine shop. He sat beside the stove, and his heart was filled with emotions. Dozens of low-grade crystals were a huge sum of money for mortals. But for cultivators it was like dirt. They wouldn't even look at it. He picked up a cup of fruit wine and took a sip. A smile appeared on his face. Mortals were weak, but sometimes, the spirit that shone on them was even more precious. Just like Tainyo and his wife, they worked hard their whole life for Ahu to grow up. In order to find a wife for their child to carry on the family line, they were humble and even slightly scheming to borrow money. But this was precisely what made them valuable. No matter what, their bloodline continued. Ahu didn't have the talent for cultivation, but perhaps there would be geniuses among Ahu's descendants, allowing the bloodline to flourish for a long time. Time passed quickly, and another 3 years passed. Ahu married a girl from the grain and oil shop, the Wang family, and had a big fat boy. Ahu's mother became a grandmother as she wished. She held her eldest grandson and teased him all day long. Her hearty and happy laughter spread throughout the alley. Ahu grew a beard and opened a blacksmith shop. Unlike his father, who risked his life by hunting, Tainyo didn't go out of the city to hunt in the mountains. Instead, he helped his son. When it was good, he could get some orders from the Luoying sect. He earned more than his father when he hunted. However, because of this, their family had less free time. They were busy all day long. Only after the shop was closed did Ahu have time to drag his tired body to Jiang Tian's place with a pot of fruit wine. He watched him treat patients and get medicine. Ahu's body, perhaps because of these years of blacksmithing, became stronger and stronger. His muscles seemed to be cast from copper and iron. Even in the winter, the young man in his 20s only wore thin clothes and didn't feel cold at all. But the wrinkles on his parents' faces gradually increased. Jiang Tian's appearance also changed in the past 10 years. He no longer looked like a young man, but a middle-aged man. A few more wrinkles gradually appeared on his face, and his temples were gray. After all, if a person's appearance did not change in the slightest after 10 years, it would be an inconceivable thing for the kind and simple neighbors around him. In the next 3 years, Huang Linger came to Jiang Tian more often. Almost every month he would come here. However, she was much more meticulous than before. Her cultivation had already stepped into the middle stage of the nascent soul stage, and she had become the hall master of the outer sect alchemy hall of the Luoying sect. It was reasonable for him to come to Jiang Tian's place to buy medicinal herbs. Furthermore, she would also give Jiang Tian some pointers on the art of alchemy, allowing Jiang Tian's alchemy and medical skills to be extremely high. Even if the mighty figures above the 9 heavens were to look at Huang Linger, they wouldn't be able to detect any abnormalities. In the late autumn of this year, the willow trees on both sides of the street were blown by the wind, and their withered yellow leaves slowly fell off amidst the rustling sounds. They were blown far away by the wind and became rootless leaves. Fallen leaves could be seen everywhere on the street. Jiang Tian walked out of the shop. He was wearing thick clothes, and a leather hat was pressed low on his head. His waist was slightly bent, and his hands were in his sleeves. He carried a wine pot in his arms, and his body exuded a faint smell of wine and bitter medicine, giving off a sense of cowardice and decadence. At this moment, if a citizen of the Eastern Empire or an old friend saw Jiang Tian, they would definitely not be able to recognize him. He was the all-powerful imperial advisor Siqing, who had killed countless people and whose hands were stained with blood. Even some of the cultivators who had fought with him would definitely not be able to recognize him. At this moment, he looked no different from a mortal. This was not a similarity in appearance, but a similarity in spirit. Even his bones and thoughts were no different. After 10 years of turning into a mortal, Jiang Tian had completely become immortal. Now his temples were gray, his facial features were ordinary, and his face was slightly old. Moreover, he had the carefree feeling of a mortal middle-aged man who had given up on fighting. He was no different from a middle-aged mortal who had been busy all his life and had run into obstacles everywhere. In the end, he was satisfied with the status quo. However, there was one thing that was slightly different from a mortal. That was his eyes, black and white, without any impurities. There was a faint glimmer of light, which made him look extraordinary. In the last 3 years, Jiang Tian had not meditated or cultivated once. Outside the shop, a gust of wind blew against his face, bringing with it the chill of autumn. Jiang Tian tightened his collar, closed the shop door, and then slowly walked into the distance. At this moment, a rather sturdy young man walked out of the ironworks shop opposite. He carried a bucket of waste charcoal in his hand. After leaving the shop, he immediately saw Jiang Tian, so he grinned and said, "Uncle Jiang, going to listen to books again?" Jiang Tian turned around, took out a wine pot from his arms, waved it, and said with a smile, "Ahu, I'm almost done drinking." The young man responded, poured the charcoal in his hand to the side, and hurried into the shop. Not long after, he ran back with a wine pot and filled Jiang Tian's glass with fruit wine. With concern in his eyes, he said, "Uncle Jiang, you're old. You should drink less of this wine to warm your body." "Uncle, I know." Jiang Tian nodded with a smile. He took the wine pot, patted Ahu's shoulder, and turned to leave slowly. Looking at Jiang Tian's back, Ahu felt bitter in his heart. In the past 10 years, the omnipotent Uncle Jiang in his eyes had aged a lot. Until now, he still remembered Uncle Jiang from 10 years ago. His face was full of heroic spirit, and his eyes were as bright as stars. He always remembered that Uncle Jiang once said that when he made a lot of money, he would go back and marry a wife who would wait for him. However, 10 years had passed in the blink of an eye, and he still hadn't seen Jiang Tian's wife. Regarding this, he didn't ask any more questions. Perhaps the aunt he had never met was the daughter of a rich family. It should be known that Uncle Jiang had made a lot of money and bought the Deshi tea house, but it was still not enough. As for her, she was already married to someone else. In the past few years, his daughter and the servant called Dahe didn't come back to accompany him. Uncle Jiang must be very sad, so he drinks so much wine every day. Ahu sighed and turned to go back into the shop. His father was also a little old, and now he was doing the main work of the shop. Even after the shop was closed, there were still many things to do. The habit of visiting Jiang Tian for treatment and medicine, which he developed when he was a teenager, could no longer be continued. It was just that every few days, he would take some time out to accompany this lonely Uncle Jiang. Endless falling trees rustled, and the wind was cold. Jiang Tian walked slowly with his hands in his sleeves. Occasionally he met acquaintances, and he would stop and chat with them. After a while, Jiang Tian finally arrived at the Deshi tea house at the corner of the street. Chapter 2025. As soon as he entered, a rather clever young man with a towel on his shoulder immediately said with a smile, "Oh, Mr. Jiang is here. Please come in." Jiang Tian entered a private room, took off his leather hat, and said with a smile, I don't have any money to reward you. It's useless no matter how enthusiastic you are. The waiter smiled and said, Look at what you're saying. The shopkeeper has ordered that the first seat by the window on the east side will always be reserved for you. As he spoke, he walked quickly to the seat by the window on the east side. He swept the towel in his hand and bent down to step back. Jiang Tian sat on the bench. Not long after, the waiter served a few dishes and a small charcoal pot with boiling water. Jiang Tian put the flagon in his hand in the small pot and began to warm the wine. He poured a cup of wine and drank it from time to time. Jiang Tian just sat there and watched people enter the tea house one after another. Gradually, more and more people entered the tea house. After about an hour, a storyteller in a black robe with 3 strands of white beard came out from the back room. As soon as this person appeared, the tea house was immediately filled with cheers, and it was quite lively. Bang! The storyteller slammed the gavel, and the guests below fell silent. The peach blossoms without an owner, the tobacco leaves with night crows. A few old wells surrounded by ruins have always been mine. The storyteller said, Today the Vermilion Bird sect of the Black Moon Empire rebelled. With the help of his teacher, the Iron Hand Saint, the Crown Prince of Yachang slaughtered 13 dukes and abolished the feudal system. He became the Emperor of Yachang. However, the other 8 dukes were unwilling to lose their fiefs and titles, so they sent troops to suppress them. The Black Moon Empire fell into chaos, and the people were in a terrible situation. In fact, his book was half true and half false. It was like a historical novel with some deductions of historical events. It could be said that Jiang Tian's reform in the Eastern Empire had a far-reaching impact. In 10 years, the advantages of the county system were fully revealed. It completely stimulated the potential of the people. Talents came out in large numbers. The country was strong and the people were rich. The central government centralized power, and the people were still full of vitality. It entered a glorious era. Today, although the major empires through different ways, they all implemented the county system. Some of them were drinking a cup of wine to dispel their military power. Some were attacking them one by one. And some were waging war. Jiang Tian listened to the storyteller with a smile while drinking fruit wine. He had been living like this for more than a year. A moment later, a slightly plump middle-aged man wearing a thick cloth jacket hurriedly walked out from the back room. He quickly walked to Jiang Tian's side and sat down. The waiter respectfully served him a pot of wine. The middle-aged fat man immediately filled the cup and drank it in one gulp. He looked at Jiang Tian and said awkwardly, Mr. Jiang this. Jiang Tian picked up the wine jug and took a sip. He smiled and said, Manager Li, I'm not here to collect rent today. Don't worry. The middle-aged fatty immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said with an apologetic smile, Business isn't good. Although I have a lot of people here now, it costs me a lot of crystals to invite this storyteller troupe. Sigh, it's not easy to do business in this world. Jiang Tian smiled and didn't say anything. Instead, he quietly listened to the storyteller. The middle-aged fatty's surname was Li, and his name was Jiang Tian. Until now, he still didn't know. 2 years ago, this man went to Jiang Tian and mortgaged the shop. He begged and begged to borrow 200 crystals, and he still hadn't paid the money back. This shop had now become Jiang Tian's. In the past year, he saw that Jiang Tian came almost every day. He felt uneasy and often came to find out what was going on. After Fatty Li left, the sound of a string instrument rang out, and another group of beautiful performers went on stage to sing. As the performers' beautiful eyes turned, the men in the tea house cheered. At this moment, a rather obscene voice came from outside the tea house. Oh, this little girl sang well. She lured me here from the north of the city. Good. The moment the voice came, an old man in a gray cotton robe walked in. The old man's hair was messy, his face was blue and purple, and there were several big footprints on his chest and lapel. As soon as he came in, he immediately cheered loudly. The waiter frowned and scolded. Where did this beggar come from? Go away. I have no money today. As he spoke, he stepped forward and was about to push him away. The old man stared and said, You touch me. If you dare to touch me, I won't get up. I'm here today to listen to the opera. The moment Jiang Tian saw the old man, his eyes suddenly flashed with a light that hadn't been seen for many years. This old man's strength was not bad. He was actually at the sage realm. The manager of the tea house sitting opposite Jiang Tian, the middle-aged fatty, immediately frowned, stood up, and walked quickly to the door. He rummaged in his pocket for a long time, and finally took out a piece of coarse crystal, which was not even a low-grade crystal. After throwing it to the old man, he said, "I've given you the money. Hurry up and leave. It's really bad luck." The old man took the turbid crystal and bit it with his teeth. He grinned at the waiter and said, "Yes, it's true. Yes, it's true. Crystal stones are the hard currency. Do you see that? Your shopkeeper is quite sensible." Humph. As he spoke, he threw the crystal stone in his hand, which fell into the waiter's hand, and said proudly, "A pot of good tea." Then his gaze swept over and landed on Jiang Tian. He walked over. Jiang Tian's heart skipped a beat, and he narrowed his eyes slightly. Could it be that this man knew that he was a cultivator? But after a while, he realized that he should be overthinking. At this time, in the whole tea house, only Jiang Tian's table was occupied. The rest were all occupied. The waiter was stunned for a moment. He looked at the turbid crystal in his hand, and then looked at the manager with a helpless face. He had seen many beggars, but this was the first time he had seen one who asked for money to buy tea. "Mr. Jiang is our distinguished guest. This seat, you can't sit there." The middle-aged fat man's face twitched. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to throw the old beggar out. But at this time, Jiang Tian raised his hand and said, "Forget it. I've given you the money. Why don't you buy something to eat? You just want to drink tea. Forget it. Serve him tea." The middle-aged fat man immediately paused. He hesitated for a moment, muttered a few words, and turned to the back room. "Little brother, you're quite sensible." The old man smiled, picked up Jiang Tian's fruit wine, poured himself a cup, and took a sip happily. "Tsk, good wine." The strange old man smacked his lips, looked at Jiang Tian, and suddenly exclaimed exaggeratedly, "Wow, wow. Wah, incredible, incredible." This old man saw a beam of spiritual light shoot out from the top of your head. You know that at such a young age, you have a body of muscles and bones. You must be a rare cultivation genius. Jiang Tian was speechless. This line, why was it so familiar? The old beggar suddenly took out a tattered book from his bosom. His face became stern as he solemnly said, "This is the first time I've seen you. As the saying goes, if I don't go to hell, who will? Are you interested in cultivating with me and practicing peerless skills? The great task of punishing evil and promoting good, and maintaining world peace is handed over to you. I'll sell you a copy of the peerless godly skill, the Buddha's palm. Only 50 pieces of low-grade crystal stones." Chapter 2026. Jiang Tian's heart was slightly moved. On the continent, there were only a few void-returning saints. Even though Jiang Tian had never met them before, he still had a thorough understanding of them. According to his behavior, it was not hard to guess that this person was the famous mad saint, Ren Fenglu. This person was obsessed with beauties and created the 100-Flower Atlas and the 10 Beauties painting. He loved good wine and good food, and was not bound by the rules of the world. He was not like the other saints who always acted high and mighty. Thus he was called the Three Addicts Saint. Ordinary sages always seem to be detached from worldly affairs, like dust, ethereal and otherworldly. However, Ren Fenglu liked to hang around in the marketplace, selling the 10 Beauties painting and the 100 Flowers chart in exchange for money to buy wine. He even turned into a beggar to experience the mortal world, crazy and foolish. Even though this person hung around in the marketplace and was often ostentatious, he should have leaked more information than the other saints. However, after Jiang Tian studied his information, he discovered that he was even more mysterious. He had all sorts of unfathomable and inconceivable aspects. In any case, I'm in the dark and you're in the light. I want to see what tricks you can play. Jiang Tian smiled and took out 50 low-grade crystals. "It's not expensive anyway. I'll buy it and take a look." The old beggar immediately gave the Buddha's palm to Jiang Tian. Then he took the crystals and left with a smile. Haha, today's business was not bad. I made a big profit. The Deshi Tea House's dishes are too ordinary. It's best to go to the Great Pine restaurant to eat. Jiang Tian wanted to open the Buddha's palm to take a look, but suddenly, the observation treasure in his chest trembled. Jiang Tian's expression greatly changed. The treasure in the critical Grand Canyon is moving. Very quickly, Jiang Tian hurriedly left. On this day, the critical Grand Canyon suddenly emitted a bright light. The vast spirit energy was 10 times or even 100 times denser than before. Universal laws and grand daos were even more condensed. Along with this surging spirit energy, there were the remains of battleships, fragments of saint weapons, and the remains of powerful existences that fell on the evil-infested ridge. These treasures came from different eras, including the Middle Age, the Ancient Age, and even the Primordial Age and the Desolate Age. Many of them were invaluable and extremely beneficial to cultivators. In an instant, the entire continent was shaken. The news that the Great Juncture Canyon was about to open spread across the entire Saint Origin world in the shortest time possible. Whether it was the aristocratic families, the mortal empires, or the secluded sects, they all received the news. In fact, many major forces had already calculated the date when the critical Grand Canyon would open. That was because the Grand Canyon only opened once every 100 years, and it had been 90 years since the last time it opened. Therefore, the opening this time was just a few years ahead of schedule. However, it didn't matter even if it was brought forward. For this opening, countless empires and sects had made ample preparations and were eager to give it a try. For everyone, the opening of the Grand Canyon meant a great opportunity. There were large amounts of spirit medicines and medicinal grasses, godly stones and treasure metals, and even the sloughs of almighty existences. When the Grand Canyon opened, it meant that the harvest season had arrived. Although the Great Juncture Canyon was dangerous in the eyes of many sects and aristocratic families, it was also a land of treasures. This place was rich in divine metals, spirit medicines and medicinal grasses. Fierce beasts roared, and demonic beasts gathered in groups. It was simply too rich. As for the origin of the Grand Canyon, and why there were so many sloughs, no one could explain it clearly. Some said that the critical Grand Canyon was born on this piece of land. Some said that the Grand Canyon came from outer space. Some even said that the Grand Canyon was the passage between the continent and the Devil Realm, and that these magic treasures belonged to the Devil Realm. However, Jiang Tian knew that the canyon wasn't connected to the Devil Realm. The real Devil Realm was incomparably vast, even vaster than the central galaxy. Its diameter was calculated in terms of 100,000 light years, and a mountain was tens of thousands of kilometers high. If the Devil Realm was connected to the Saint Origin world, the Saint Origin world would be immediately devoured by its terrifying attraction force. Jiang Tian had entered the Great Juncture Canyon several times in his previous life, and discovered the reason for the eruption of Devil Qi. It was just a fragment of the Devil Realm that fell into the canyon. The Devil Realm fragment should have fallen in the Desolation era, and the specific age was unknown. However, the area of the Devil Realm fragment was not small. Moreover, there was an unknown supreme demonic being, the Devil's Claws, which constantly released Devil Qi to nourish them and formed a Devil's Nest, which was a system suitable for the demonic beings to live in. There were too many demonic beings, and resources were scarce. Naturally, they had the desire to expand. Therefore, from the Desolation era to the ancient times and the Middle Ages, the Devil's Tide broke out from this place again and again, causing great turmoil and Devil's calamity. Of course, the mighty figures of the human race wouldn't sit idly by. Since the Desolation era, there were leaders of the human race who organized armies of cultivators to suppress the demonic beings and destroy the Devil's Nest. In the final analysis, this area had become a battlefield between the human race and the demon race. Of course, there were many treasures and wreckage left behind. In the end, an unparalleled sage in the Middle Ages planted a subimmortal tree in the Devil's Nest, which suppressed the supreme demonic being, the Devil's Claws. Therefore, there was no Devil's Tide after that. Of course, the overflow of Devil Qi was inevitable. Even though the Grand Canyon was in the territory of the Eastern Empire, once it was opened, the Eastern Empire directly opened this area to the rest of the world. Because of this opening, there was a surge of spirit energy and cultivation resources. However, in the historical records, it was often accompanied by the appearance of demonic beings. Once a high-level demonic being entered the continent, the Eastern Empire would bear the brunt. Because of this, the Eastern Empire's attitude was to allow everyone to come and pick up treasures. However, once the Devil's Tide broke out, there would be people to stop it. The Eastern Empire opened its doors and allowed cultivators to enter the Devil's Nest and the Grand Canyon. In just a moment, the experienced great sects and countries all sent out their disciples to the evil-infested ridge to see if there was a great fortune to find the legendary treasures. As for the host, the Eastern Empire, they had already sent out an army of cultivators to guard the entrance of the evil-infested ridge. Outside of welcoming the disciples from the great sects and countries, they were also there to see if there were any sects or cultivators that were qualified to enter the evil-infested ridge. Even though the evil-infested ridge was said to be shared by the entire world. In fact, the sects that were qualified to enter the evil-infested ridge were all great sects and countries or famous heroes. As for the smaller sects and ordinary cultivators, they didn't have any hope of entering the evil-infested ridge. As a sacred ground, the Luoying sect naturally didn't want to fall behind. Not only was this the time to harvest cultivation resources, but it was also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the disciples to train themselves and improve their cultivation. Whether it was killing demonic beasts or avoiding the evil energy, both were rare experiences. This time, the two big shots, Lian Huahan and Saint Qianmo, were leading the team. There were also 4 spirit transformation disciples and dozens of nascent soul disciples. Of course, this wasn't enough. They still needed to bring a few servant disciples as well as some external laborers as a supplement. Cultivators were high above and didn't need to do many things themselves. They needed to take care of their daily lives. Their flying ships, chariots, and other treasures needed to be maintained, so they needed to organize their harvest. As for Jiang Tian, he quickly applied to be a laborer. He boarded the flying ship and headed towards the evil-infested ridge. In fact, before the departure of the Luoying sect's disciples, even half a month ago, there were already people stationed at the evil-infested ridge. The evil-infested ridge was like a dragon lying on the earth, separating the heaven and earth. The entrance to the evil-infested ridge was right in front of the cliff. This cliff spanned for 100,000 miles. Standing on top of this cliff and looking at the 8 directions made people feel that the 8 directions were small, and they themselves were insignificant. Chapter 2027. The first group to enter the evil-infested ridge was the Eastern Empire's team. The Eastern Empire's vanguard, outside of being the host to welcome the disciples from the great powers, was also responsible for screening the qualifications of the sects and cultivators to enter the evil-infested ridge. This time, the Eastern Empire's vanguard was personally led by eldest Princess Mou. In addition, the Eastern Gorge County Governor, Lin Yang, was the vice commander. In the first Hidden Dragon exam after the Reformation, Lin Yang performed well, and was ranked in the top 5 of the empire. At that time, he was appointed as the Demon Slayer General, and took orders from eldest Princess Mou. In the war against the pantheon of demons in the following years, he fought valiantly at the vanguard and made remarkable contributions time and time again. His official rank was jumping every year. Right now, he was already in the level of a governor of a border. Today, the Myriad Demon Temple only existed in name. The demons either surrendered or were killed. Dongfangjia's whereabouts were unknown. Outside of the fact that his official rank was not hereditary, his authority was even greater than his father's in the past. The original 108 territories were divided into more than 50 counties. As the governor, the area under his jurisdiction was even larger than Jinyuan Ho. In order to eliminate the Myriad Demon Temple, Lin Yang fought in the evil-infested ridge for many years. Since he was the governor, he understood the situation and was fully responsible. 10 years of fighting, 10 years of tempering, Lin Yang was no longer the ignorant youth of the past. His face had become resolute while his gloomy gaze carried traces of fierceness. He wasn't as lively and frail as he was all those years ago. His cultivation also increased by leaps and bounds, entering the early spirit-severing stage. His aura was mighty and his future was limitless. When the Eastern Empire's team was stationed at the evil-infested ridge's entrance, many cultivators had already heard the news and came. Especially the vagrant cultivators and young cultivators in the vicinity. After hearing the news, they came early to watch from afar. These vagrant cultivators and young cultivators definitely didn't have the qualifications to enter the evil-infested ridge. However, they wanted to fish in troubled waters and see if they could sneak into the evil-infested ridge during the chaos. Even if they couldn't sneak into the evil-infested ridge, they could use this chance to see the grand characters of the great powers. If they had the chance to see the grand characters of the saints, then this trip wouldn't be a waste. After the Eastern Empire's troops arrived at the evil-infested ridge, these vagrant cultivators wisely left the ridge and watched from afar. They were not foolish enough to oppose a monster like the Eastern Empire. The Flying Phoenix sect master is here. Not long after Lin Yang and the others arrived on the mountain, they saw a cultivator riding a flood dragon horse. There were only 3 to 5 people following this sect master. Even so, this sect master's natural laws surged, and there were great Tao fragments submitting to him. This made the expressions of many small cultivators change. The Flying Phoenix School is amazing, ah. 3rd place in the 2nd Hidden Dragon exam. They actually received special permission from His Majesty to create a school and obtain the qualifications to enter the evil-infested ridge and explore the Grand Canyon. Many young cultivators enviously commented after seeing the Flying Phoenix School in the distance. When the sect master of the Flying Phoenix sect arrived, Lin Yang, who was in charge of welcoming the guests, only cupped his fists from afar. The sovereign Su De didn't dare to be arrogant in front of Lin Yang, so he settled down on his own. Next, a few sect masters from the Eastern Kingdom who were qualified to enter the evil-infested ridge also came. However, they didn't bring many people and didn't dare to show off. They were very respectful towards Lin Yang and Mou. This was the characteristic of the Eastern Kingdom. The sects were no longer high up, they were vassals of the imperial power. The imperial power was not naturally obtained, it was bestowed by the people. The ruler was light while the people were important. The responsibility of cultivators was to fight for the mortals. The real big head is still the Starfire Academy, ah. The Starfire Academy is supported by the entire kingdom. That's right. Sect masters like Suda were all recruited from other countries and sects in the continent through the Hidden Dragon exam. They were allowed to create the Flying Phoenix sect in order to maintain the diversity of cultivation methods. Originally, they were all supposed to be teachers at the Starfire Academy. Many cultivators laughed and said. Very quickly, they also arrived at the Starfire Academy. Rays of light pierced through the heaven and earth. Natural laws surged, and the Grand Tao surrendered. There were dozens of spirit formation cultivators, and several hundred nascent soul cultivators. Unfortunately, there were no saints. However, this momentum was not inferior to the 10 great divine schools. Their development could be said to be rapid. The leaders were Lin Hanqing and Fang Jinlong. The two of them had already given up their ancestral titles and fiefs. Moreover, they disliked the competition in the imperial court and were unwilling to become ministers. Furthermore, they missed Jiang Tian and helped him fulfill his wish. Thus, they became the principals of the Starfire Academy and nurtured talents for the Eastern Kingdom. Even though 10 years had passed, the Eastern Kingdom still missed Jiang Tian. The Starfire Academy erected a stone statue of him that was as high as the clouds. Moreover, he would always be the honorary principal. The Black Moon Empire's Emperor Yachang is here. As the days passed, experts from the other great sects and countries outside the Eastern Kingdom arrived one after another. Boom, boom, boom. In the horizon, a series of rumbling sounds echoed. Suddenly, a group of armored cavalry trod on the sky. This armored cavalry trod on the void, and the divine steeds under them were like lightning. In an instant, they drew a long shadow in the void. This armored cavalry trod across the sky like a flash of light. Nay, along with a long neigh, The cavalry that was like a torrent of steel instantly stopped above the cliff. The entire cavalry was close to 1,000 people, but they stopped in an extremely orderly formation, and their movements were like moving clouds and flowing water. This armored cavalry troop was all equipped with divine steeds and armor. It was as if they were a triumphant iron brigade that had just returned from the battlefield. Every disciple of the armored cavalry troop was cold and murderous. Such an entire troop was cold and merciless. Their murderous intent soared to the sky, making it hard for people to breathe. Seeing such an armored cavalry troop, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. To be able to cultivate such an armored cavalry troop, one could only imagine how shocking their origin was. What kind of powerful sect and country was this? It's the Yachang Emperor and our teacher, the Iron Hand Saint. After the Yachang Emperor arrived, Mou and Lin Yong personally welcomed him. The Yachang Emperor was the crown prince of Yachang. After 10 years of bitter cultivation and countless opportunities, he had already reached the cultivation of a half-saint. What was even more terrifying was that behind him stood an old man dressed in hemp clothes. The old man was tall and burly. The laws around him were as vast as the sea, and the great Tao was as heavy as a mountain. The pressure of a void-returned saint was released mightily, causing everyone to tremble in fear. Iron Hand Saint. Mou hurriedly bowed respectfully. The strength of the Iron Hand Saint was much stronger than that of Suzhou. Moreover, he could be said to be one of the strongest saints in the secular world. Greetings, Iron Hand Saint Yachang Emperor. Lin Yong also bowed his head, concealing the hatred that flashed in his eyes, but a chill appeared in his heart. 10 years ago, if it weren't for Yachang's instigation, although his sister Lin Dai, was stupid, she wouldn't have rashly provoked Jiang Tian, and ended up being killed with a palm strike. There were dozens of disciples of the Iron Hand Saint, and all of them were extraordinary. With one look, one could tell that most of these disciples had stepped into the divine transformation realm. As a disciple of the younger generation, to be able to step into the divine transformation realm was already very impressive. Especially in recent years, the Black Moon Empire had been reforming the system of counties and counties. Feudal lords were rising, and the flames of war were spreading. The essence of heaven and earth was exhausted, and cultivation was very difficult. The Tianluo sect is here too. Yin Nancian is leading the group. I heard that Yin Nancian was extremely lucky. A dozen years ago, he was only at the mid-divine transformation realm, but now he has reached the half-step void return realm, and is known as a half-saint. As the deputy sect leader, he has a chance to become a true saint in the future. Someone said emotionally. When the Tianluo sect arrived, they were also extremely arrogant. The man in the lead wore a simple and natural long robe. His beard was as dense as steel needles, and his expression was solemn. There was also a long sword on his back. If there were knowledgeable people, they would be able to tell that the scabbard was made from the thinnest piece of dragon skin on the back of the silver-bearded golden-eye dragon. Although this kind of dragon was only a nascent soul realm demon beast, it was extremely rare and lived in the forbidden area of the universe. If Jiang Tian was here, he would probably be greatly shocked as well. This was because at this time in his previous life, Yin Nancian was only at the mid-divine transformation realm, but now he was at the half-step void return realm. This was probably due to Jiang Tian's return, which more or less caused a butterfly effect and changed the course of history. For example, the pantheon of demons was destroyed earlier, the eruption of the canyon earlier, and Yin Nancian's advancement earlier. The man and woman behind him were his son Yin Beifei, and his disciple Zhao Feifei. The man wore a white robe that shone brightly. He was tall and straight like an unsheathed sword. He had reached the early divine transformation realm, and was also a sacred grade god. As for the woman, she was dressed in crimson clothes. Her waist was slender like a snake, and her 2 long legs were wrapped in a short skirt. Her entire body was like a burning flame, but her pretty face was delicate and pretty. Her black hair hung down like ink, and she lowered her head slightly. Her 2 big eyes blinked, just like the girl next door. However, her cultivation level was not to be underestimated. She was also at the early divine transformation realm. Why haven't I seen any ancient saints come? As the mighty figures of the divine sects, holy grounds, and aristocratic families arrived one after another. Some inexperienced cultivators did not know the reason and asked curiously. The so-called ancient sages were still returned to void stage saints, but they had already reached the return to void final stage. Ancient saints basically did not show themselves. They were all in a state of concealment, so they were even more mysterious. Some people even said that the ancient saints were just illusory legends, and that they had all died out long ago. You don't know. Legend has it that the critical canyon is very strange. Even saints at the mid and late divine transformation realm can't pass through the barrier. An old cultivator said, "Ancient saints won't appear easily now." An even older cultivator shook his head gently and said, "In the past 30,000 years, no new late divine transformation realm ancient saints have appeared on the continent. The original lifespan of the ancient saints was more than 30,000 years, and the lifespan of a return void cultivator is 30,000 years. Therefore, they are either at the end of their lifespan or have stopped their blood flow and are unwilling to come out." That's right. Although the critical canyon is a great opportunity, it's not enough for a return void cultivator to reach the Tao integration realm. If they come out, it'll be a waste of their essence. It's not worth it. Some people expressed their agreement. With the arrival of the disciples from the great sects, the evil-infested ridge became a sea of people, and many cultivators set up camp. Some sects had treasure pavilions that were floating in the air, and their disciples directly lived in the pavilions. Some sects came with a huge ancient ship, which was both their flying treasure and their temporary residence. There were also cultivators who gathered in groups of 3 to 5, chatting loudly and rubbing their palms together, waiting for the right moment to strike. However, the number of cultivators that came to the evil-infested ridge was not limited to just these. In the sky, there were disciples from the great sects that came from time to time. Some rode on swords, some rode on rocks, and some rode on huge flying mountains. There were all kinds of colors and strange things. It could even be said that those below the nascent soul realm and vagrant cultivators that didn't have the backing of a great sect didn't dare to enter. After all, there were too many powerful forces here. Outside of the ancient saints that didn't take action, it could be said that the experts of the entire continent had gathered here with an unprecedented lineup. Even though there was a certain amount of order, if you offended an expert and they wanted to kill you, no one would risk their life for a little cultivator like you. That would be an unforeseen disaster. In this chaotic atmosphere, Jiang Tian arrived with the identity of a servant with the Luoying sect. He saw Yan Nancian at first glance. "You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."